Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain had begun its steady descent as the old car rolled down the narrow forest road. With each turn, the trees seemed to crowd closer, their branches reaching out like the fingers of forgotten spirits. The headlights flickered briefly before steadying, casting long shadows on the damp earth. You could smell the wet pine, earthy and thick, mingling with the sharp tang of the rain. Ahead, a faded sign appeared, its paint peeling, Hollow Pines Lodge. It had been a long journey, and the promise of a warm fire was enough to bring a sense of relief. As you turned onto the gravel driveway, the lodge loomed ahead, large, imposing, and quiet. The structure, built of dark timber, seemed to merge with the surrounding forest, as if it had always been part of the woods. The sound of the rain pattering against the roof filled the air, mixing with the occasional creak of the building settling into the night. You parked under the overhang and grabbed your duffel bag, the air cool and crisp against your skin. The sound of your boots crunching on the gravel was loud in the otherwise silent night. The door to the lodge creaked open as you approached, revealing an older man behind the counter. His thick beard and deep-set eyes gave him an almost otherworldly look, like someone who had lived in these woods for far too long. "Welcome to Hollow Pines," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Storm's coming in. You'll be needin' a fire to keep the chill off." As he handed over the key, the distant crackle of thunder echoed through the forest. You nodded and headed up the stairs, feeling the weight of the atmosphere settle on your shoulders. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The door to your room creaked as it swung open, revealing the space beyond, a modest yet comforting setup. A large four-poster bed stood against one wall, its heavy, dark wooden frame a stark contrast to the light linens on the bed. The windows were wide, overlooking the dense forest that stretched out beneath a sky darkened by thick clouds. The faint glow of lightning illuminated the horizon, casting eerie shadows through the branches of the trees. You set your bag down and went over to the small fireplace in the corner. The logs, already stacked and ready to ignite, beckoned. A few moments later, the warmth of the fire began to spread, slowly erasing the chill in the air. The crackling sound of the fire joined the rhythmic tapping of the rain against the window, creating a strange sense of comfort amidst the isolation of the woods. As you sat by the fire, a low, mournful wind whistled through the trees outside, carrying with it a strange noise. It wasn't the usual sound of wind rustling through the leaves. It was almost like a whisper, faint at first but growing louder with each gust. You strained your ears, listening intently. The whispers seemed to form into words, but no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't make them out. They sounded almost as if they were calling to you, beckoning from the forest. Your heart began to beat a little faster, but you brushed it off. It was probably just the wind playing tricks. But the whispers continued, and with each passing minute, they seemed to grow closer. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the floorboards outside your room. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking just beyond the door. You froze, the warmth of the fire suddenly feeling far less comforting. You rose from your chair, walking cautiously to the door and opening it just a crack. The hallway was empty, silent, save for the creak of the old wood beneath your feet. You looked down the dimly lit corridor but saw nothing. The whispers had stopped. Just as you were about to close the door, something caught your eye. At the far end of the hallway, where the shadows seemed deepest, there was a faint light, flickering like the glow of a distant campfire. You didn't know why, but you felt drawn to it. The hairs on the back of your neck prickled as the strange compulsion took hold of you. You grabbed your jacket and stepped into the hallway, your footsteps muffled by the old carpeting beneath. The lodge felt colder now, as if the warmth of the fire you left behind was something the building itself was trying to keep hidden from you. The light at the end of the hall flickered again. It was almost like it was pulsing, breathing in rhythm with your own heartbeat. You found yourself walking down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. As you neared the end, the scent of wood smoke grew stronger, mingling with the damp earthiness of the forest outside. And then the door at the end of the hallway opened, slowly, with a creak that felt almost deliberate. Inside, a large, stone fireplace crackled with a welcoming fire. But this room was unlike any you had seen in the lodge. The walls were adorned with strange, hand-carved wooden figures, faces twisted in expressions of fear and sorrow, eyes hollow and staring. In the corner, a large, old-fashioned rocking chair moved slowly back and forth, as if someone had just left it. Your pulse quickened as a chill ran down your spine. The room was empty, save for the flickering fire and the eerie rocking chair. But the whispers were back louder now. They seemed to echo from all directions, coming from the walls themselves. A figure emerged from the shadows. At first, you thought it was just another trick of the dim light, but as the person stepped closer, you saw them clearly. A tall woman, her face obscured by a dark hooded cloak. She seemed to glide through the room, her movements fluid and unnatural. "Do not go into the woods tonight," she said, her voice soft and cold as though it had been carried on the wind. "They are awake." Before you could speak, she disappeared into the shadows as silently as she had arrived, leaving only the faint smell of damp earth and something older, like decay, in her wake. The room was once again quiet, the whispers now replaced by the crackling of the fire. But the warning lingered in your mind, and a deep, unsettling feeling settled in your chest. The rain outside seemed to pick up, pounding against the windows as if trying to warn you as well. The forest was awake, and it was calling for you. You stood frozen, the woman's warning echoing in your mind. "They are awake." The words clung to you like the dampness of the night air. You shook your head, trying to shake off the unease creeping up your spine, but it lingered, stubborn and insistent. Slowly, you backed away from the fireplace, eyes scanning the strange room. The figures on the walls seemed to watch you, their hollow eyes following your every move. The rocking chair creaked once more as if acknowledging your presence, but you couldn't bring yourself to sit down. Instead, you turned and hurried out of the room, the door closing behind you with a soft, final click. The corridor was even colder now, the walls seeming to pulse with an unseen energy. The whispers were gone, but you could still feel them, like a distant hum, buried deep within the wood of the lodge. You rushed back to your room, heart pounding, but when you closed the door, the room felt no safer. The fire in your hearth was still crackling, but its warmth now felt hollow, as if it too was trying to hide something. You pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the stormy night, and tried to convince yourself it was just a strange experience. A trick of the wind, the storm. But deep down, something told you it wasn't just that. The whispers had been real. The woman had been real. And the warning, the woods were awake. You paced the room, trying to steady your breathing. There had to be some logical explanation. Maybe it was a local legend. Some folklore the innkeeper had shared to get guests talking. But you couldn't shake the image of the woman, her hooded face obscured, her words cutting through the heavy silence like a knife. Then a sudden noise broke through your thoughts, the unmistakable sound of footsteps again, this time from below. Not outside in the hallway, but from the floor beneath you. Slowly, cautiously, you walked to the window and peered out into the rain-soaked darkness. The forest was an endless expanse of shadow and silhouette, the trees swaying violently in the wind. Nothing seemed out of place, but the longer you stared, the more the trees seemed to move, too much, too unnaturally, like they were shifting to reveal something hidden. A flash of light flickered in the distance. A fire. Or maybe something far worse. It was coming from the depths of the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows darker. You could feel it now, the pull, that deep, primal tug that beckoned you toward the unknown. The wind howled louder, rattling the window, and you quickly backed away, shaking off the impulse to venture out into the night. But the footsteps continued beneath you, now accompanied by a soft scraping sound. It was rhythmic, like something dragging across the floor. You couldn't ignore it any longer. You grabbed your flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the darkness of the room as you moved toward the door. The lodge felt alive tonight. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of the wind, each shadow that seemed to linger a moment too long, all filled with an unsettling sense of urgency. You stepped out into the hallway again, but the sounds had stopped. The silence was deafening. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As you walked slowly down the corridor, the walls began to feel like they were closing in on you. The dark wood panels seemed to press in from all sides, their ancient grain shifting as if they were alive. The flickering of the light above you only added to the sense that you were being watched. You stopped at the top of the stairs and peered over the railing into the darkness below. The steps were louder now, unmistakably coming from the floor below. Slowly, you began to descend, each step creaking under your weight, the sound seeming far too loud in the quiet of the house. When you reached the bottom, you realized you had no idea where you were going. The hallway stretched out before you like a maze, the flickering light from the single lantern above casting long, eerie shadows. A low growl sounded from the far end of the hall, deep, guttural, and unnerving. You froze, the sound vibrating in your bones. It was like nothing you had ever heard before, a mixture of animal and something far darker, ancient. Instinctively, you pressed yourself against the wall, sliding along the shadows, your heart hammering in your chest. You held your breath as the growling grew louder, closer. Your flashlight flickered, casting wild beams of light across the hallway. Then, in the distance, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, too tall, its long limbs dragging on the floor, its head hanging unnaturally low, as if it had been broken and bent in ways no human body should be. The face was a grotesque mask of shadows, featureless save for the faint outline of a mouth, and it was smiling. The figure moved with jerky, unnatural motions, its body twisting and contorting as it made its way down the hall. Every step was accompanied by a sickening crack, like bones breaking. You stumbled back, heart racing, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway seemed to stretch infinitely, and the only escape was the front door, which you could no longer see through the haze of terror clouding your mind. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure stopped. The smile twisted into something darker, more sinister. The growl grew louder, reverberating through the walls. The woman's warning echoed once again. They are awake. Your heart pounded as the grotesque figure loomed before you, its broken body twitching in spasms that seemed almost too fast to follow. The low growl deepened, reverberating off the lodge's ancient wood, a sound so wrong it felt like it was coming from beneath the earth itself. Every instinct screamed at you to run, but your legs felt like lead, frozen in place by a terror you had never known. The figure didn't move for a moment, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as if it was studying you. The darkness of its face, featureless but somehow full of malice, seemed to swallow the faint light from the lantern above. Then, without warning, it lurched forward, dragging its twisted limbs across the floor with an eerie screech. You stumbled backward, your back crashing against the cold wooden wall. For a brief, terrifying moment, you couldn't move. The only sound in the lodge now was the shuffling of the creature's movements, its growl reverberating through the floorboards beneath you. The air grew heavier, thick with the smell of wet earth and decay, like something long buried had been awakened. Your breath quickened and you forced yourself to move, to think. The hallway stretched out before you, a labyrinth of dark rooms and closed doors. The front door seemed impossibly far away, but there was no other way out. You needed to get to it. The creature was still moving, dragging itself along, its twisted body sliding closer with terrifying speed. Panic surged through your veins. You had to escape, but the longer you stayed here, the closer it came. With a deep breath, you forced yourself into motion. You darted around the corner, your feet hitting the creaking floorboards as you made your way back down the hallway. The growling was now almost deafening, pulsating through the walls. It felt as if the entire lodge was alive, shifting, groaning under the weight of whatever curse had been placed upon it. You burst into the main room, your eyes immediately locking onto the front door. It was just a few feet away, the promise of freedom almost within reach. But as you moved toward it, a cold hand, no, a cold presence, gripped the air around you. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, as if they were alive, reaching for you. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. You whipped around, your breath hitching in your chest. The creature, still dragging itself across the floor, had stopped moving. Its twisted face lifted, and for the first time, you saw its eyes, two deep, empty sockets where eyes should have been, pulsing with an unnatural light. The smile had faded, replaced with something far more horrific, a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged, broken teeth. The growling intensified, now joined by a low hum, as if something else was moving within the walls themselves. You felt it then, the presence of many more creatures like the one before you, their hunger palpable in the air. You were no longer alone. Without warning, the lodge seemed to tremble. The walls groaned, the beams creaked as if the structure itself was shifting, expanding, or collapsing inward. It was as though the entire forest was breathing, its pulse matching your own quickened heartbeat. The temperature plummeted, and you could see your breath clouding in the cold air. The fire in the hearth flickered and died, leaving the room plunged into near-total darkness, save for the sickly glow emanating from the creature's eyes. Your mind raced, searching for any way out, but the door remained shut, and the hallway was now filled with shadows that seemed to pulse and writhe as if they were alive. The whispers returned, so loud now, so close that they felt like a physical presence in the room, brushing against your skin, tugging at your mind. "They are awake," the whispers chanted, their voices low and haunting as though 1,000 people were speaking at once. "They are awake, and they want you." The floorboards groaned beneath your feet, and the creature's jagged mouth twisted into a grin that stretched impossibly wide. It opened its mouth, its teeth gleaming in the faint light, and a terrible screech pierced the air, a sound so agonizing that it made your blood run cold. But before you could react, something caught your eye, a shadow darting across the far wall. You turned just in time to see the fleeting figure of the woman from earlier, her dark cloak fluttering behind her as she vanished into the shadows of the room. Her warning still lingered in your mind. "Do not go into the woods tonight." She had said the woods were awake, but it seemed the forest had already made its way into the lodge. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices, each one filled with dread and hunger. The creature advanced, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it was drawn to your very presence. With every step it took, the floor beneath you seemed to buckle, and the room swam with an oppressive energy. You felt your body grow heavy, as though the air was thick with something far worse than just the weight of the storm outside. You took a step back, your heart pounding in your chest. The woods are awake, you thought again, the realization striking with a chilling clarity. This wasn't just the lodge. It wasn't just the creature. It was the entire forest. The forest that had been calling you, beckoning you into its depths. And it was angry. With a final desperate glance toward the door, you lunged forward, your hands gripped the handle, but as you turned it, the door resisted as if something far stronger than any force of nature, was holding it shut. You pulled harder, the wood groaning under your grip. The growling from behind you grew louder, and the whispering voices joined in, filling your ears until it was all you could hear, all you could feel. You were no longer alone. The door refused to budge, its stubborn resistance like the weight of the world pressing down on you. Panic surged through your veins as the creature's growl reverberated through the room, the very air vibrating with its insatiable hunger. You could feel it moving closer, the sound of its twisted limbs dragging across the floor sending shivers through your body. The whispers, now louder than ever, filled your ears, suffocating you in a tide of cold, ancient voices. They're awake. The words repeated like a broken chant, each syllable seeping into your thoughts, taking root. They, whoever they were awake and they were coming for you. You tugged harder at the door, your heart racing, but the wood felt as if it were bound to the very earth itself. It wasn't just locked. It was sealed. Then, without warning, the room seemed to shift, as though the very lodge itself was breathing. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked, and a deep, guttural growl reverberated from beneath, a sound that seemed to rise from the bowels of the earth. The air thickened with an overwhelming presence, like the forest itself had seeped into the lodge, its ancient power crawling beneath the floorboards and through the walls. You looked around in desperation, searching for any other way out. The shadows, once motionless, now seemed to pulse with a life of their own. They danced along the edges of the room, stretching and warping as if trying to reach you. From the corner of your eye, you saw something shift, a figure moving slowly, silently, its form barely visible in the dim light. It was the woman from before, her hooded figure now standing in the far corner, watching you with those cold, unblinking eyes. She didn't move, but her presence seemed to fill the space, a palpable force that made your skin crawl. Her voice, when it finally came, was a whisper lost in the cacophony of growls and whispers. The woods are not what they seem. The lodge is a prison, but not for you, for them. The word sent a chill through your bones. What did she mean? For them? The phrase echoed in your mind, but before you could process it, the air around you thickened further, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. And then, without warning, the floor beneath you shifted. The lodge groaned, the wood creaking as though something far larger than just a building was waking up. Suddenly, the shadows in the room surged forward, flowing like liquid darkness, wrapping around your legs and pulling you toward the center of the room. You gasped, struggling to free yourself, but it was no use. The shadows clung to you, tightening like iron chains. You screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive air, muffled and lost. The woman stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, the eerie smile never leaving her face. She reached out, her pale hand brushing the surface of your cheek, sending a jolt of cold through your body. "The forest is alive," she murmured, her voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "And it remembers you." The words didn't make sense, but they didn't need to. There was something in her eyes, something ancient, that told you everything you needed to know. She wasn't warning you. She was preparing you for something far worse than the creature stalking the halls. The shadows tightened their grip, and the floor beneath you began to split, the crack snaking its way across the room like a wound opening. The earth was moving, shifting beneath the lodge as if the building were being pulled into the forest itself. You could feel the pull, something primal, something old, deep within the roots of the trees. Then the figure, the creature, was upon you. Its presence was overwhelming, consuming every inch of the room. The floor buckled beneath its weight as it slithered closer, its twisted limbs dragging across the ground, leaving deep gouges in the wood. The growl filled the air, deafening as it raised its head. Its featureless face was now inches from yours, its hollow eyes gleaming with hunger. The woman stepped back, her figure fading into the darkness. The shadows loosened their grip just enough for you to move. But you didn't need to run. You couldn't run. You felt the pull. The forest. The lodge. They were calling to you, their influence seeping into your very being. You were being drawn into something much larger than yourself. The creature, the whispers, the woman, it was all a part of something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. The growl from the creature intensified, vibrating through your body. Its jagged mouth opened wider, revealing row after row of needle-sharp teeth. You could see the hunger in its eyes, but there was something more, something far more sinister. It wasn't just hunger, it was a promise. And just before it lunged, something shifted. Another presence, far older, far more powerful, swept through the room, pushing the creature back. It wasn't the woman or even the shadowy figures in the corners. This was something far worse, something far older than the forest itself. The creature froze, its growl silenced as the temperature in the room dropped to an unbearable chill. The very walls seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and suffocating. The force, whatever it was, gathered, swirling in the center of the room, pulling the shadows into itself. And then, with an awful crack, the air split. The world around you seemed to warp, and a cold, unnatural wind howled through the lodge. The shadows, once thick and alive, were now nothing but mist, swirling in the air like smoke. The creature screeched, an agonizing, heart-stopping sound, as it was pulled into the void that had opened beneath it. But before it vanished completely, it turned to face you one last time, its broken body twitching, its eyes burning with rage. Then it was gone. But the air remained thick with something far darker than you had ever felt. The woman's voice echoed one last time, as if from the very bowels of the earth. They are awake, and now so are you. The world around you hung suspended in an eerie silence. The oppressive weight of the air didn't lift, but it became something else, darker, more suffocating, as if the very atmosphere was alive, watching, waiting. The shadows no longer moved, and the floor no longer groaned. Even the whispers had quieted, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. You stood frozen in place, your heart racing in your chest, the pulse in your ears louder than ever before. The cold that had settled in the room seemed to crawl beneath your skin, digging deep into your bones, making your entire body feel heavy, sluggish. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows and pushing against the walls, but here, within the lodge, it was still. Too still. You turned slowly, your gaze landing on the crack in the floor where the creature had been pulled. The darkness there was like a wound, a jagged, gaping tear in the fabric of reality itself. It swirled, twisting and churning as though it had a mind of its own, hungry, vast. The lodge around you seemed to hum with an ancient energy, as if the very foundation of the building was alive and waking up from a long slumber. You could feel it now, more acutely than before, the connection between the forest and the lodge, the pull of the woods. It was like something had reached out, touched you, and claimed a part of you. The pulse in the air, the pull of the shadows, the whispers that lingered just beyond your hearing. It was all tied together, linked by something far older than the trees themselves. And then, from the corner of your eye, something flickered. The woman. Her cloaked figure emerged once again, standing in the doorway where the shadows stretched long and thin. Her presence was so quiet, so subtle, that you almost didn't notice her at first. But the moment you did, a wave of cold dread swept over you, stronger than before. She watched you with those dark, hollow eyes, her face hidden beneath the cloak's shadow, her lips barely moving as she spoke. You have opened the door, and now it cannot be closed. The words sent a cold shiver through your spine, the truth in them undeniable. Whatever this place was, whatever it had been, was no longer contained. The creature, no, the things, had been kept locked within for a reason, and you had shattered that lock. You were always meant to be part of it, she continued, her voice soft but full of weight. A part of the lodge, a part of the woods. They chose you. You took a step back, your breath catching in your throat. Chosen? By whom? By what? The woman stepped forward, her movements fluid, silent, like smoke slipping through cracks in the walls. The forest chooses those who are ready, those whose souls carry the scent of the woods. It has always been this way. Long before this lodge was built, long before the first tree grew, the forest was here, watching, waiting. She paused, her gaze lingering on you, and for a moment, you thought you saw something flash in her eyes, a brief, terrible glimpse of something far worse than the creature. They are not just creatures. They are the forest. The woods are alive, and they take their chosen with them. Those who wander too far, those who listen to the call, those who feel the pulse of the trees, the whisper of the wind, they are marked. Your chest tightened as her words sank in. The pulse of the trees? The whisper of the wind? You thought of the strange compulsion you'd felt since arriving, the sense of being drawn deeper into the forest's embrace, as if something was calling to you from within the woods. But it is not just the trees that call, she murmured, her eyes darkening. It is the very earth beneath them. The roots that stretch deeper than the deepest roots of any tree. The roots that have woven themselves into the foundations of this place. You felt a tremor in your hands, a deep, unsettling vibration. The shadows that had seemed to retreat now stirred again, rising like a tide of ink across the floor. They spread across the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself thickening, swirling as though it were trying to draw you into its depths. The woman took another step toward you. You have been marked just as the others before you. The forest doesn't forget. It remembers every soul that crosses its threshold, every soul that listens too closely to its call. And now you are bound to it. You shook your head, trying to clear the fog that had settled in your thoughts. I don't understand. What do you mean? What is happening here? Her gaze softened, but it didn't make her words any less chilling. This lodge was built as a barrier, a way to keep the forest's hunger at bay. But over time, the forest has grown stronger and the lodge has weakened. Now, it no longer serves as a sanctuary. It is a prison. But not for the creatures. She paused again, and for a brief moment, you thought you saw a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. It is a prison for the ones who live here, those who were meant to stay, to be chosen. The shadows that had been swirling around you began to thicken again, their edges turning jagged and sharp. The darkness seemed to grow from the cracks in the floor, the walls, as if the entire building were being consumed by it. It was suffocating, this weight in the air, this darkness that felt like it was pressing down on your very soul. A low rumble sounded from beneath the lodge, deep and guttural, a warning, a sign of something stirring from the earth's depths. The ground beneath you trembled. They are coming, she whispered. And now so are you. With that, the shadows rushed toward you, engulfing you in an inky blackness. The cold returned, wrapping itself around your chest and throat, making it harder to breathe. The woman's figure was the last thing you saw before the darkness took over completely. The last thing you felt was the pulse of the earth beneath you, as if it had begun to beat in time with your own heart. And then you were falling into the deep. Time had no meaning here. It was as though the very concept of it had dissolved, leaving nothing but an oppressive, inescapable present. Your body felt weightless, suspended in an endless void, and the air around you was thick, dank and heavy, like the forest floor after a heavy rain. The deep blackness consumed everything, every corner, every thought, until there was no way to tell where the darkness began or where you ended. You gasped for breath, but the air seemed to thicken with each inhale, as though something was closing in around you, tightening, squeezing. The familiar sounds of the lodge, the crackling fire, the storm outside, all of it had faded away, leaving only a hollow, suffocating quiet. The pulse, the beat of the earth beneath you, was louder now, unmistakable, a low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to vibrate through your very bones. And then, slowly, something began to shift in the dark. A faint light flickered in the distance. It was faint, like the glow of a dying ember, but it was enough to draw your attention. You tried to move toward it, but your limbs felt sluggish, unresponsive, as though they were submerged in thick water. Each attempt to push forward only seemed to draw you deeper into the darkness. The pulse quickened. The light flickered again, brighter this time, casting eerie, elongated shadows across the nothingness. The shadows seemed to move, undulating, writhing in the dark, like serpents coiling around unseen forms. Your heart raced in response, and the dread that had been crawling at the edges of your mind now took root, burrowing deep inside. The light grew stronger, clearer, and you felt a compulsion to follow it, a pull so powerful that it was impossible to resist. The pulse beneath you seemed to grow louder, faster, syncing with your own racing heartbeat. And finally you moved. Step by agonizing step, you forced yourself toward the light. With each movement, the shadows seemed to stretch and lean toward you as though they were alive, hungry. But there was something else too, something that you couldn't quite understand, something that tugged at the edges of your mind, whispering to you, drawing you closer. They are calling you. Come. The voice was faint at first, barely a whisper, but it grew louder, clearer with each passing moment. The shadows surged forward, but you fought against them, pushing past the creeping darkness with everything you had left. The light ahead grew brighter still, now taking on a strange, otherworldly glow. It was no longer just light. It was a presence, warm and inviting, but far too familiar. You had felt it before. The pulse beneath the earth. The same pull that had drawn you to this place. The forest had always been calling to you, and now you were finally listening. The shadows receded as the light engulfed you, its warmth spreading through your body, filling the empty, aching spaces inside you. The world around you shifted, the darkness parting as the light grew brighter, illuminating a vast, hollow expanse beneath your feet. It was unlike anything you had ever seen. An ancient chamber carved from the very bedrock of the earth itself, its walls lined with roots so thick they looked like veins, pulsating with the same rhythm you had felt beneath the lodge. The air here was thick with something old, ancient, alive. In the center of the chamber, a massive tree stood, its bark gnarled and twisted, its roots plunging deep into the ground, disappearing into the shadows. Its branches reached high into the ceiling of the cavern, their leaves rustling in a wind that wasn't there, as if the tree itself was breathing. The light radiated from the heart of this tree, glowing with an ethereal energy that seemed to pulse in time with the beat of the earth beneath you. And standing before the tree, gazing at you with hollow eyes, was the woman. She was no longer cloaked in shadow. Her face was now visible, and in the dim, pulsing light, it was as though she was both familiar and unfamiliar, a part of the very air itself. Her eyes were deep, endless pits, full of secrets too old to comprehend. But there was something else there now, something more, like a deep sorrow that stretched far beyond the boundaries of this place, far beyond the limits of time. "You have come," she said, her voice echoing in the cavern, a soft whisper that filled the hollow depths. "You have crossed the threshold. Now you must understand." Her words felt like a weight pressing down on your chest, suffocating you with their meaning. Understand what? You wanted to scream, to ask her 1,000 questions, but your voice was lost in the vastness of the chamber. You felt as though you were suffocating, trapped between the earth and the sky, the past and the future. "This place," she continued, her voice reverberating through the hollow air, "is not what it seems. The lodge, the forest, the creatures, they are all part of it. They are the guardians of something much older, much more powerful. This is not just a forest. This is the heart of the world." Your pulse quickened as her words sank in. The heart of the world. She stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate, as if she were part of the very air around you. The light from the tree pulsed in time with her steps, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the walls. "You were chosen," she said softly. "The forest called to you because it knew you would listen. The root of all things lies here in this place. And now you must choose. Will you join us? Will you take your place among the others?" The shadows on the walls seemed to shift in response to her words, growing thicker, darker, as though they were watching you, waiting for your response. "Do not be afraid," she whispered, her voice soft and soothing. "This is the way it has always been. The forest has its claim on you. The question now is whether you will accept it." Your heart pounded in your chest, the light from the tree now blinding in its intensity, its energy vibrating through the very air around you. The woman's hollow eyes locked onto yours, pulling you deeper into the chamber, into the heart of the forest, into the ancient power that lay beneath. And then, for the first time since you arrived, you understood. You were not just a guest here. You were a part of it. The realization hit you like a sudden, crushing weight, and for a moment, you felt the world around you blur and fade as if the very ground beneath you was shifting. You are not just a guest here. The words echoed in your mind, their meaning sinking deep into your soul. The woman's hollow eyes bore into you, and something in her gaze seemed to shift. It wasn't just curiosity, no, it was something darker, something far more ancient. She wasn't waiting for you to understand, she was waiting for you to accept, to give in. The light from the massive tree pulsed again, its glow now brighter, almost unbearable, as though it was calling you, pulling you toward it with an invisible force. You took a step forward without thinking, your feet moving as if they had a mind of their own. The air around you was thick, warm, and tinged with the scent of earth, of roots stretching deep into the ground. It was almost suffocating. "Come," the woman said, her voice a soft murmur lost in the vastness of the cavern. "You have been chosen. The forest has known you for a long time." You swallowed, your throat dry. "The forest has known you for a long time." The words spun in your mind like they were part of a memory just out of reach, something that had been buried deep, forgotten. Something ancient, something tied to the land itself. You had felt the pull the moment you arrived, but now it was overwhelming, all-consuming. And yet, deep within, a sense of fear rose in your chest. There was something wrong with this place, something in the way the woman spoke, the way the air hummed with a strange energy. The ground beneath you seemed to ripple as though it were alive, shifting, pulsing, like the very earth was breathing. "Do you feel it?" The woman's voice cut through your thoughts, her tone gentle, coaxing. "The pulse of the earth, the beat of the roots beneath you? It is the heartbeat of the world. You are standing at the crossroads of existence. The old ways are here, and they are calling you." Her words settled over you like a heavy fog, and you could feel them sinking deep into your bones, filling you with an overwhelming sense of inevitability. The forest was calling to you, yes, but it was also binding you, filling you with a deep understanding, a knowledge that was far beyond your grasp, yet felt strangely familiar. You took another step forward, closer to the tree. The roots, thick and ancient, stretched out like gnarled fingers digging deep into the earth. They seemed to pulse with life, and as you neared the base of the tree, the ground beneath you trembled. The pulse, once faint, now vibrated through your entire body, thrumming through the soles of your feet and up into your chest, aligning with the beat of your heart. It was impossible to ignore. "This is the binding," the woman whispered, her voice growing faint as if carried on the wind. "Once you stand here, you can never leave. The forest call will follow you wherever you go." You stopped in your tracks, the words freezing you in place. "The binding?" You turned toward the woman, but she was already retreating into the shadows, her form barely visible in the dim light. "But you don't understand," you tried to say, but the words felt like they were trapped in your throat, too heavy to utter. The roots beneath your feet began to shift, writhing like serpents, twisting upward toward you, their ancient bark scraping against the ground as they moved. The air grew thick, almost electric, as the pulsating energy of the earth wrapped itself around you, pulling you closer to the center of the tree. A dark, shadowy figure emerged from within the roots. Another creature, but this one was different. It wasn't like the one from before with its broken limbs and jagged teeth. This one was larger, its form more solid, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, feral light. It stood motionless for a moment, its massive form casting a long shadow across the cavern floor. And then it moved. The ground shook as the creature advanced, its footsteps echoing through the hollow chamber like the beating of war drums. The roots seemed to part for it, allowing it to pass as though it were part of the very earth itself. But it wasn't here for you. No, its eyes were fixed on the tree, its gaze filled with a kind of reverence. It lowered its head in silent homage, before stepping back into the shadows, disappearing from view as quickly as it had appeared. You were alone now, standing before the great tree. The roots were close now, their tendrils wrapping around your legs, pulling you toward the heart of the tree. You struggled against them, but it was futile. The pull of the earth beneath you was too strong, too ancient. The tree's heartbeat had synchronized with your own, its rhythm now filling your every breath. "Do you accept?" The woman's voice echoed again, softer this time, as though it came from the very walls of the cavern, from the roots themselves. "Do you accept your place in the forest, among those who are bound to it?" The words hung in the air, vibrating with the weight of centuries, of lifetimes. The tree loomed before you, its massive form almost overwhelming in its presence. The roots around your legs tightened, not with force, but with an undeniable sense of inevitability. You couldn't escape. The pulse was too strong, the energy too ancient. You could feel it now, the connection, the binding. You were no longer an outsider, a guest passing through the forest. The woods had claimed you, and now you were a part of them. You took a deep breath, and for the first time since entering the lodge, the weight in your chest began to lift. The forest had always been a part of you, waiting to be discovered. The pull, the whispers, the creatures, they were all part of the same force, the same ancient power that had shaped this place for longer than you could comprehend. And with that realization, a strange calm washed over you. You closed your eyes, surrendering to the pulse, to the call, to the forest. You felt the roots tighten around you, not in anger, but in acceptance, as if they were pulling you closer, welcoming you into the fold. When you opened your eyes again, the chamber had changed. The shadows had deepened, and the woman had disappeared, leaving only the tree, its branches now heavy with leaves that shimmered in the pulsing light. The ground beneath you was soft, rich with earth, and as you looked down, you realized you were no longer standing on solid ground. You were part of the forest now. The air around you grew thick with an unsettling stillness, a silence that wasn't just quiet, but pressing, heavy. The pulse beneath your feet, once rhythmic and steady, now felt erratic, like a heartbeat caught in the throes of something ancient, something beyond comprehension. The roots, still coiled around your legs, had settled into a quiet, patient grip, as though they were waiting for something, or someone. You glanced around, the cavern stretching infinitely in every direction, the glow from the tree casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. The branches of the tree above you rustled softly, but there was no wind. The leaves, shimmering faintly, seemed to pulse with an energy that mirrored the thrum beneath your feet. Every breath you took felt thick, as though the very air was alive, breathing with you, pulling you deeper into the heart of the forest. The woman's voice echoed through the chamber once more, but this time, it wasn't a question. It was a statement, a cold, unyielding truth. You are no longer who you were. The words settled into you like stones sinking into the deepest parts of the earth. No longer who you were. The weight of her statement pressed down on you, but in some strange way it felt right. This place, this forest, had always been a part of you, even if you hadn't known it. And now the connection was undeniable. You could feel it pulsing beneath your skin, thrumming with every heartbeat. You tried to move, but the roots, though gentle, refused to let you go. Their tendrils wrapped tighter around your legs, pulling you toward the heart of the tree, and as you took a step forward, the ground beneath you seemed to ripple in response, the earth itself parting to allow you to pass. The forest was moving with you, not against you. It was guiding you. Slowly, almost reluctantly, you reached out a hand toward the massive tree. Its bark, rough and gnarled, seemed to throb with a life of its own, and as your fingers brushed against it, a shock of energy surged through your body, sending a jolt of heat through your chest. The pulse, now synchronized with your own heart, felt like it was expanding, filling your entire being. You were no longer just standing in the cavern, you were becoming part of it, woven into its very fabric. A distant howl echoed from the depths of the forest, a primal cry that sent a shiver down your spine. It was a reminder of what you were leaving behind and what you were about to become. There was no turning back now. The woman's figure appeared before you once again, but this time she was different. Her cloak was gone, replaced by something more ethereal, like shadows themselves wrapped around her form. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her face, though still obscured by the darkness, seemed to shift, as if it was a reflection of the forest itself, ever-changing, elusive. The smile on her lips was no longer comforting. It was knowing, ancient, like she had seen countless souls pass through this place, just as you had. "You are bound to the forest now," she said, her voice echoing in your mind as much as it did in the space around you. The old ways are within you. The roots, the trees, the very earth, it is all a part of you now. Her words wrapped around you like a warm blanket, but there was no comfort in them. Instead, you felt a surge of something deep and unrelenting, an overwhelming sense of power coursing through your veins, filling you with a hunger you couldn't quite name. The forest was awake, alive, and it was pulling you into its heart. "Will you embrace it?" she asked, stepping closer, her form blurring and shifting in the dim light. "Will you accept the forest as your own and become one with it?" The question echoed in your mind, reverberating with the weight of the forest itself. The choice seemed simple, yet impossibly complex. To accept the forest, to become part of it, meant losing everything you had ever known, your past, your identity, your connection to the world outside. But it also meant power, an unimaginable connection to something far older than time itself. The forest could give you everything, but it would take everything in return. The roots around your legs tightened, not painfully but insistently. Their grip was no longer merely a tether. It felt like a promise, a contract sealed in the very blood of the earth. The tree above you seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying as though it was waiting for your answer. For the first time, you truly understood what she meant by the binding. You had crossed a threshold, one that could never be undone. You were part of the forest now, just as the creatures, the trees, and the shadows were. You felt their presence all around you, their eyes watching, waiting. They were waiting for you to embrace it, to accept your place among them. The woman's eyes gleamed in the dim light, and she stepped aside, allowing you a clearer view of the tree. Its trunk, massive and ancient, seemed to pulse with life, and as you gazed at it, you saw something strange, something more than bark and roots. The tree was alive in a way that defied all logic, its surface shifting and twisting, revealing shapes and forms that you couldn't quite comprehend. The forest chooses those who listen, those who understand. It is not about power. It is about belonging. The words echoed in your ears as the ground beneath you began to vibrate again. The roots around your legs moved, pulling you forward, urging you toward the center of the tree. You had no choice but to follow, the pull irresistible, the bond already deepening. As you stepped closer, the tree's bark seemed to soften, becoming almost fluid, its surface alive with movement. It felt as though the very tree was inviting you inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood, and the warmth from the tree's glow seeped into your skin, spreading through your veins. And then you stepped inside. The world exploded into light. For a brief moment, everything around you was consumed by an all-encompassing radiance, blinding and pure. The roots, the walls, the very earth beneath you seemed to dissolve, leaving you suspended in the heart of the forest, in a place that was beyond time and space. The light pulsed around you, wrapping you in its warmth, filling you with the knowledge of the ancient woods. You understood now what the woman had meant. You were no longer who you were, but something new, something that belonged to the forest. The light faded, and you found yourself back in the cavern, but it was different now. The air was thicker, richer, alive with an energy you had never felt before. The roots that had once coiled around you were now part of your being, stretching deep into the earth, connecting you to the heart of the forest itself. You were bound to it now, irrevocably. and in the distance the howl echoed again, louder, more urgent this time. The creatures, the shadows, the whispers of the woods, they were all waiting for you. You were home. The silence that followed your transformation was profound. It was as though the very forest held its breath, waiting for you to fully come into yourself, to become a part of it. The roots, now intertwined with your being, throbbed with a pulse of their own, resonating with the rhythm of the earth itself. They were no longer just part of the ground beneath you. They were within you, stretching deep into your core, connecting you to something far larger than yourself. The bond had been forged. The forest call was now a part of you. You stood at the heart of the cavern, your senses sharpened to an unbearable degree. The air around you was thick with the weight of centuries, of memories long forgotten, and you could feel them all swirling in the depths of your mind like leaves caught in an autumn wind. You could feel the eyes of the creatures in the shadows, their presence heavy, pressing down on you. They were watching, waiting for something, waiting for your next move, your next step into the unknown. The tree above you, once a towering, distant figure, now felt like a part of your own body. Its roots had merged with yours, its energy flowing through your veins, connecting you to the world in a way you had never imagined. The glow from its bark was soft, ethereal, casting long shadows across the cavern walls. Its light was a constant reminder of what you had become, what you had joined. You were no longer a wanderer. You were part of the forest now, as ancient as the trees, as eternal as the roots that ran deep beneath the earth. But even as you stood there, surrounded by the pulse of life, a sense of unease tugged at the back of your mind. The air was heavy with something else, something darker, more sinister. The growls, the whispers, the faint sounds of movement from the shadows beyond the reach of the light, it was all building to something, you could feel it. The creatures in the dark were restless, stirring in anticipation. But for what? And then the ground trembled beneath your feet. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the cavern, coming from deep within the roots of the earth. It was like the earth itself was waking up, stirring from a long slumber. The shadows in the corners of the cavern flickered, lengthening, twisting like living things as if they were coming to life. The howls from the forest grew louder, more frantic, as if the creatures were moving closer, drawn toward the heart of the woods, drawn toward you. The woman, the one who had led you here, who had shown you the way, stepped out of the darkness, her form now more solid, more defined. She was no longer just a shadow, a fleeting figure. Now she seemed to be a part of the forest itself, her figure shifting with the shadows, her presence blending into the very walls of the cavern. "You have accepted your place," she said, her voice no longer soft, but filled with an undeniable authority. "The forest is pleased." Her words seemed to echo through the space, reverberating in your chest. The weight of her gaze, of her presence, felt like it was pressing against your very soul. You were no longer just an observer. You were one of them. The forest's hunger, its pull, was now a part of you as natural as breathing. But there was something else in her voice, a subtle change, a flicker of something darker beneath the surface. "You must understand," she continued, stepping closer, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "The forest always claims those who hear its call, but it does not give freely. It takes as much as it gives." The shadows seemed to grow deeper, more oppressive as she spoke. The creatures in the dark were closing in, their movements becoming more erratic, more urgent, as though they were preparing for something. The ground trembled again, and the air grew colder, thicker, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. "You are no longer just human," she said, her voice low, filled with a dark promise. "You are a part of the forest now, but that comes with a cost. A price to be paid." You felt the pulse within you intensify, the rhythm of the earth quickening in time with your heartbeat. The trees above seemed to groan, their branches creaking as if they too were anticipating something. The air around you shimmered, alive with energy, and the shadows seemed to shift once again, their dark forms moving toward you. And then the first creature emerged from the darkness. It was unlike the twisted, broken thing you had seen before. This creature was larger, more solid, its body covered in thick, bark-like skin. Its eyes were glowing, filled with an ancient, primal fury. It moved toward you slowly, deliberately, its massive limbs dragging along the ground with a low, rumbling growl. The air around it seemed to crackle with an almost palpable energy, the forest itself reacting to its presence. The woman stepped aside, allowing the creature to pass. "The time has come," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You must prove yourself to the forest. You must embrace what you are becoming." The creature stopped in front of you, its glowing eyes locking onto yours. Its breath was heavy, ragged, and it exhaled with a low, guttural growl. It was as if it were testing you, sizing you up, as if it was waiting for some kind of sign. Your heart raced in your chest, but you stood your ground. The forest was now a part of you, and you felt it stirring within, a deep, primal connection that surged in response to the creature. It was a bond that went beyond understanding, a connection forged in the very roots of the earth. The creature's growl softened, and its glowing eyes blinked slowly, almost as if in approval. It took a step back, its massive form retreating into the shadows, but its presence lingered like a weight pressing down on you. "You have been marked," the woman said, her voice cold and final. "Now you are one of us." The words hung in the air like a decree, sealing your fate. You were no longer a stranger in the forest. You were bound to it. The shadows, the creatures, the very earth beneath you, it all belonged to you as much as you belonged to it. And in that moment you understood the price. You had given yourself to the forest, but the forest had given itself to you. It was a symbiotic bond, one that could not be broken. The forest would take from you as much as it would give. And now the creatures were your kin, the shadows were your allies, and the roots were your blood. The woman turned to leave, but before she did, she looked over her shoulder one last time. "Welcome home," she whispered, her voice a lingering shadow. As she disappeared into the dark, the pulse of the forest grew stronger, its call now resonating within every fiber of your being. The shadows closed in around you, wrapping you in their embrace. The forest was alive, and you were a part of it. Forever. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, the kind of silence that only the deepest parts of the forest could produce. A quiet so profound, so dense, that it felt like the entire world had stopped moving. Every breath you took seemed amplified, your heart pounding in your chest like a drumbeat in the void. The shadows that had once surrounded you now felt closer, more alive. They no longer just lingered in the corners of the cavern, but seemed to wrap around you, almost protective, like sentinels guarding their own. The earth beneath your feet trembled again, a low vibration that was neither a rumble nor a quake, but a reminder of something ancient stirring below. The forest had awoken fully now. It had claimed you, and in return, it would demand something from you, something that could never be given back. You could feel its hunger. It was in the ground, in the air, in the dark places where the light never touched. And it was in you. The woman's words still echoed in your mind, her voice a shadow that followed you like a weight you couldn't shake. "Now you are one of us." The cost had been paid. The bond was forged. But as you looked around the cavern, at the twisting, gnarled roots that now seemed to pulse with your every breath, you knew the price wasn't over. It would never be over. You were no longer just a wanderer who had stumbled upon an ancient forest. You were a part of it now, a part of the hunt, a part of the woods that reached deep into the bowels of the earth. The forest owned you, and you could feel it as if the very roots were whispering to you, urging you to embrace your new nature. The shadows around you shifted, and you turned to find the first of the creatures emerging from the dark. This one was different, sleeker, faster, its body covered in dark, bark-like scales, its eyes glinting with an otherworldly intelligence. It moved with predatory grace, its limbs long and sinuous, like a serpent in the underbrush. The creature's presence was commanding, as though it had been born from the deepest parts of the forest itself, molded from the earth's ancient hunger. It approached you, its movements slow but deliberate, its glowing eyes never leaving your face. "Do you understand now?" The woman's voice cut through the silence again, though this time, it was not just a whisper. It was a command, an invitation to step deeper into the world you had entered. You watched the creature closely, feeling its presence surge through you. It was more than just an animal, more than a beast. It was part of the forest's will, its hunger, its need for life to feed its eternal thirst. And now you were a part of it. The creature stopped in front of you, its breath coming in deep, slow rasps as if it were testing you, evaluating whether you were truly one of them. Its sharp, jagged teeth gleamed in the dim light, its glowing eyes still locked on yours. And then it bowed its head. The shift in the air was palpable. A sudden understanding, a moment of silent recognition between predator and prey, between you and the forest. You were the forest now. The hunt was your birthright. The creatures no longer saw you as an outsider, but as a partner in their ancient, primal dance. The hunt was no longer something that happened to you, it was something you would lead. Before you could fully comprehend the significance of the creature's gesture, it turned and disappeared into the shadows. The shadows followed it, curling and shifting like smoke as it moved, and you felt something shift inside you too, a hunger awakening deep within your bones. The trees above you creaked as if they too had felt the change, and in the distance, you could hear the faint sound of movement, low growls, rustling leaves, the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. The forest was alive, and it was calling to you, guiding you into its depths. The woman stepped forward, her form now clear in the dim light, her face no longer hidden by the shadows. Her eyes, once cold and empty, now gleamed with a kind of fiery intensity, as if she had always known this moment would come. "The hunt begins," she said softly, her voice echoing in the cavern, mingling with the sounds of the forest awakening. "And you will lead it." You felt a shiver run down your spine as her words took root in your mind. The hunt. The very concept seemed both alien and familiar at the same time. The forest had chosen you, bound you to its will, and now, it was asking you to take on the role of its leader. You had never been part of anything like this ancient primal force. But now that you were part of it, the call of the hunt felt natural, as if it had always been buried within you, waiting to be unleashed. The forest had been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to awaken to your true nature. You were no longer just a creature of the human world. You were a part of something far older, far more powerful. The woman stepped closer, her presence like a weight in the air. The creatures of the forest obey the call. The trees, the shadows, the beasts, all of them will follow your lead. The hunt will be your domain, your command. You took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and growing things. There was no fear, no hesitation. The forest had claimed you and you had accepted. There was only the pull of the hunt, the undeniable urge to move, to lead, to embrace what you had become. The roots beneath your feet twisted and moved, guiding you forward. The darkness was now your ally, the shadows your companions. The pulse of the earth filled your body, urging you to follow. The woman stepped aside, allowing you to take the first step into the deeper, darker part of the forest. Go. Her voice was a command, but there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes. Perhaps approval. Perhaps something darker. And with that, you began to move. The ground beneath you was soft, the earth giving way to your every step, as if the forest itself was parting for you, opening the path ahead. You could feel the presence of the creatures, the ancient watchers of the woods, stirring in the distance. Their glowing eyes were just beyond the trees, their forms moving like ghosts between the trunks, watching you, waiting for your next move. The shadows deepened around you, becoming a living, breathing thing, twisting and shifting as the hunt began. You could hear the creatures moving closer, their growls and whispers filling the air, echoing through the trees. The hunt had begun and you were the one leading it. And as you moved deeper into the heart of the forest, you realized that there was no going back. You were bound to this place, to the creatures, to the earth itself. The forest had claimed you. It had taken you and made you its own. And now the forest was your home. And the hunt would never end. The path ahead was a labyrinth of shadows, twisting and winding like an ancient serpent, its scales shifting beneath the weight of your every step. The air grew denser with each movement, thick with the smell of damp moss, decaying leaves, and the rich scent of the earth's pulse. Every breath felt like you were inhaling the very essence of the forest, its history, its hunger, its power, all of it flowed into you with every heartbeat. The forest wasn't just alive, it was aware. And you, now fully bound to it, could feel it watching, guiding you. The woman's words echoed in your mind, like an insistent drumbeat. You will lead the hunt. The weight of them pressed against your chest, not with fear, but with an undeniable truth. The hunt was not just a hunt, it was a calling, a duty, and it was a part of you now. The creatures of the forest, the beasts that once roamed in the shadows, would follow you. They would obey your command. But as you moved further into the forest's depths, a strange feeling began to take root within you. The creatures were no longer just distant, lurking figures. No, they were closer now, their presence palpable in the shifting shadows, their eyes watching your every move, their growls vibrating in the air around you. The forest was full of them, watchers, predators, and the restless spirits that had long since surrendered their humanity. The deeper you went, the more you could sense them, feel them move through the trees, their primal instincts drawn to you like a magnet. A flicker of movement caught your eye, a shadow darting between the trunks of the ancient trees. It was fleeting, quick, and when you turned to follow it, there was nothing but the swaying leaves and the soft, rhythmic sounds of the wind through the branches. The creatures of the forest were masters of the dark. They could vanish into the shadows, becoming part of the very night itself. The thrum of the forest grew louder in your ears, its heartbeat now synchronizing with your own. The deeper you ventured, the more you could hear it. The distant cries of the hunt, the call of the ancient pack that had lived in the forest long before you had ever arrived. The creatures, once so distant, were now part of your world. You could feel them, feel their hunger, their desire to move, to chase, to claim. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl cut through the silence, and your heart skipped a beat. The ground beneath your feet trembled, but it wasn't the forest itself moving. It was the creatures, the guardians of the deep, closing in on you. You stopped, every muscle in your body tensed, as you became acutely aware of the presence surrounding you. The creatures were not just watching, they were listening. Their eyes burned from the dark corners of the forest, glowing faintly in the night. They were waiting for you to make your move, to lead them into the hunt. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was one of them, the first to approach. It was large, its form massive and almost indistinct in the darkness, as though the shadows themselves had come alive, taking shape. The creature's body was a patchwork of bark and bone, its eyes glowing like embers in the night. Its breath was deep and heavy, a low rumble that vibrated in your chest. The creature's gaze locked onto yours, and in that moment, you felt the weight of its ancient presence. It was more than just an animal, it was a spirit of the forest, a guardian, a creature who had lived in these woods since the world began. And now it was looking to you, waiting for the signal. You stood still, your body tense but composed. The hunger inside you thrummed in response to the creature's call. This was what you had been born into. You were the leader now. It was your turn to command. The creature stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. Its glowing eyes never left yours, and as it drew nearer, the shadows around it seemed to move, curling like smoke in the wake of its presence. You could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on you, the ancient trees leaning in, watching, listening. It was time. Without a word, you extended your hand, palm facing outward toward the creature. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried the weight of everything that had led you here. You were not just a participant in the hunt. You were leading it. And as you stood there, holding the creature's gaze, you could feel the other beasts gathering in the shadows around you, drawn to the call of your command. The creature lowered its head in response, a deep, guttural growl rumbling from its chest as it accepted your leadership. It was not a sign of submission, but a recognition of the bond between you, forged by the forest itself. The ancient power that flowed through your veins was now a part of this creature, and in return, its strength would be yours. As the creature turned and melted back into the shadows, the rest of the forest stirred. The trees groaned as if they too had awakened, their branches reaching higher into the sky, their roots pulling deeper into the earth. The wind picked up, a low howling sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. The creatures of the forest were on the move. The hunt had begun. You moved deeper into the forest, the call of the hunt now guiding your every step. The creatures followed, their glowing eyes burning in the darkness, their forms just beyond the reach of the trees, waiting for your next command. You could feel them, their hunger, their restless energy, their primal need to hunt. But there was something else stirring in the shadows. A presence older than any of the creatures that now followed you, something ancient. The very air around you seemed to tremble with its power, and as you moved forward, you could sense it growing closer, drawing nearer with each passing moment. It was the source, the heart of the hunt, the thing the forest had been waiting for, and it was waiting for you. The trees began to thin, the dark shadows receding into the distance as the path before you cleared. The ground was softer now, wetter, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet, something decayed. You could feel the pulse of the earth growing stronger with each step, as though you were drawing closer to something far greater than yourself. In the distance, a faint light flickered, soft, golden, almost ethereal. It was the source of the forest's power, the heart of everything, the core of the ancient forest that now claimed you. And just as you reached the edge of the clearing where the light flickered, a figure emerged from the dark, draped in shadows. It was the woman, the one who had led you here, who had shown you your place in this world. Her eyes gleamed with a fire that mirrored the light in the distance. And with a single glance, you knew that the hunt was no longer just a test of survival. It was a trial, one that would decide your true place in the forest. The ancient spirits of the woods had claimed you, and now, it was time to prove you were worthy of the power that lay ahead. The heart of the forest is near, she whispered, her voice cold as the night. But it is not easily tamed. Only those who prove their strength, their hunger, those who embrace the darkness fully, may pass. You looked into her eyes, your heart beating faster as the pulse of the earth synchronized with your own. The hunt had come full circle, and the true trial was about to begin. The air around you grew heavier, more oppressive, as if the very forest itself was closing in. The ground beneath your feet seemed to hum with an energy that wasn't entirely natural, a rhythm that echoed deep in your chest. You could feel the pulse of the earth now, not just in your veins but all around you, the ancient heartbeat of the forest, the heartbeat of the creatures, and the heartbeat of the trial that lay ahead. The figure of the woman stood before you, her silhouette flickering in the dim light that filtered through the trees. Her presence was like a living shadow, her form both there and not, shifting in the way that only the forest could make a thing seem to do. Her eyes, glowing faintly with an eerie fire, locked onto yours, and you knew this was the moment. This was where it would all either come together or fall apart. The heart of the forest, she said, her voice low and soft but sharp like a knife's edge, is not something to be taken lightly. It is not just power that calls to you, but something far older, something that will test you. It will test your hunger, your instincts, your willingness to sacrifice. Her words hung in the air, heavy with an undeniable truth, and you felt the weight of them pressing down on you. The hunger that had been growing inside you, stirring with every step you took deeper into the forest, now began to take on a life of its own. It wasn't just a hunger for flesh, but something far more primal, something that reached down into the deepest parts of your soul, to the very core of your being. It was a hunger for belonging, for power, for the forest to accept you fully. You have already embraced the forest, the woman continued, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. But now you must prove your worth. Prove that you are more than a wanderer in the woods, more than a creature drawn to the darkness. You must become one with it, not just in body but in spirit. You nodded slowly, the pull of the forest growing stronger, more insistent, until you felt like you were being drawn toward the very heart of it. The trees around you seemed to bend and sway as if they too were guiding you, urging you forward. The shadows, once distant and impenetrable, were now your allies. Your senses were heightened, your mind clear, and the call of the hunt was ringing in your ears like a song you could not ignore. You will face what lies ahead alone, she said, stepping aside, her voice fading into the wind. This is the trial of shadows, where you must confront your deepest fears, your darkest desires. What lies ahead is not just the forest. It is you. The last of her words echoed in the air as she disappeared into the shadows, leaving you alone in the clearing. The light from the distant heart of the forest flickered again, casting long, wavering shadows across the ground. The space before you seemed to open up, revealing a narrow path that led deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees on either side of it were twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled hands, their roots clawing at the earth below. As you stepped onto the path, the forest seemed to breathe, the air growing thicker, denser, until it felt as though you were moving through a living, breathing thing. The shadows around you deepened, curling around the trees and reaching out to touch you as you passed. It felt as if the very forest itself was alive, watching you, waiting for you to make your next move. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the soft crunch of your boots against the damp earth. You felt the hunger rising within you, an overwhelming primal urge to chase, to hunt, to take what was yours. The creatures of the forest, those that had once been your companions, now felt distant, like ghosts fading into the mist. They were no longer there to guide you. Now you were on your own. A low growl echoed from the shadows, followed by another, closer this time. You stopped, the hair on the back of your neck standing on end. The growls grew louder, more distinct, and you could feel the weight of their gaze upon you. You weren't alone. The creatures were watching, their eyes glowing from the darkness, their forms shifting in and out of view. But this time, it wasn't just their hunger that you felt. No, it was something else. A fear, a terror that clawed at the edges of your mind. And then it emerged from the darkness. A massive shadow, more beast than creature, its form shifting and distorting with every step it took. It was a figure made of smoke and twisted bark, its glowing eyes locked onto yours, burning with an intensity that was both familiar and terrifying. It was the guardian of the heart, the true trial. And it was here to test you, to see if you were worthy of what lay ahead. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl, its form slowly becoming more solid, more defined, until it was towering over you. Its body was a mass of gnarled wood and twisted vines, its limbs long and serpentine, coiling like roots in the earth. The creature's eyes, glowing like embers in the dark, studied you, waiting for you to make the first move. You took a step forward, your heart pounding in your chest, and the ground beneath you seemed to shift, to bend in response to your movement. The air around you grew heavy, and the creature's growl deepened, vibrating through your chest. It was the forest's hunger, its desire to claim, to consume. But you were no longer afraid. You were part of the forest now. The hunger that had once driven you to seek its power, its embrace, was now a part of you. The forest's heartbeat was in your chest, and its call had become your own. You had embraced the darkness, the shadows, and now you were ready to face whatever came. The creature lunged at you, its limbs outstretched, but you were faster. You moved with a fluidity that was unnatural, your body responding instinctively to the primal rhythm of the forest. You ducked beneath the creature's swipe, the sharp claws narrowly missing you, and you felt a surge of power, a surge of hunger rise up from within. With a growl of your own, You leapt forward, your body moving like a predator in the night. The creature recoiled, its glowing eyes widening in surprise, but you didn't stop. You were no longer a weak, uncertain wanderer. You were the hunt, and you had become something more than human, something greater. The creature's growls turned into snarls as it backed away, its limbs snapping and shifting like the twisting branches of the trees. But it was too late. The forest had already chosen you, and now it was time to prove it. With a final roar, you reached forward, your hand grasping the creature's throat, your fingers sinking into its bark-like skin. The creature struggled, but it was weak now, its energy fading, its power being consumed by yours. You could feel the forest's heartbeat racing in your chest, merging with your own, until there was no distinction between you and the land that surrounded you. You were one with it now, one with the hunt, the creatures, and the very earth beneath your feet. As the creature's form began to dissipate, its power draining into you, you stood tall, breathing heavily, your chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the earth. The shadows that had once seemed oppressive now felt like a cloak, wrapping around you, comforting you. The trial was over, and you had passed. The moment the creature's form faded into the shadows, it left behind an eerie stillness that hung heavy in the air, like the calm after a storm. The forest, once alive with the whispers of creatures and rustling leaves, was now eerily quiet. The pulse beneath your feet had slowed, and the shadows that had once seemed to breathe with life now felt still. You stood there for a long moment, your heart still thudding in your chest, the weight of the trial settling heavily on your shoulders. You had faced the guardian of the forest, the true trial, and emerged victorious. The forest had tested you, pushed you to the very edge of your being, and you had embraced it. You had proven that you were worthy of the heart's power. But what now? What did this victory mean? What was the heart of the forest truly calling you to do? The distant flickering of the golden light you had seen earlier drew your attention. It was faint, but it pulsed with an otherworldly glow, like a beacon in the dark, calling you forward. The air around it shimmered like a heat haze, and the scent of something sweet and decayed hung heavy in the breeze. You could feel its pull, stronger now than ever before. The heart of the forest awaited you. But as you began to move, the ground beneath your feet seemed to grow softer, the path ahead more treacherous. The shadows closed in tighter, their edges curling like fingers reaching out to touch you. The further you went, the darker it became, until the trees above were so thick that even the golden light could barely break through. The path ahead was now barely visible, shrouded in a thick fog that had rolled in from the depths of the forest. It felt like the world was closing in around you, pressing you towards something that you weren't sure you were ready to confront. But there was no turning back now. The forest had claimed you. The hunt had claimed you, and you had embraced it all. The deeper you went, the more you felt the hunger rising again, not the hunger for prey but for knowledge. The forest's secrets were here, hidden beneath layers of shadow and time. The heart would reveal them to you, if you were worthy. As you walked, the fog seemed to grow denser, swirling around you like tendrils of smoke, curling in the air, obscuring your vision. The silence pressed in, suffocating, until even the faintest sound of your footsteps seemed like a loud intrusion in the stillness. The deeper into the heart of the forest you went, the more you felt like you were being pulled into a vast, endless chasm of time and space. There was no sign of the creatures, no sign of the woman, just you, alone in the dark embrace of the ancient woods. Then suddenly the fog parted, and before you stood a massive, towering tree, its bark a deep, almost black shade, covered in thick vines that pulsed with an ethereal glow. Its roots stretched out across the ground like the fingers of a giant hand, curling into the earth with a powerful grip. The air around it hummed with energy, and the glow from the tree seemed to pulse in time with your own heartbeat. It was both beautiful and terrifying. This was the heart, the core of the forest, the place where all the ancient power of the woods converged. The tree was alive in a way that defied comprehension, its branches reaching high into the sky, its roots burrowing deep into the earth. It was not just a tree, it was the forest itself, breathing, living, feeding on the very life force of the world around it. The ground beneath your feet began to tremble, ever so slightly, and you felt the pull of the tree like a magnet drawing you in. The hunger that had been building within you flared once again, a sharp, insistent need to step forward, to approach it. Your body moved on its own, the primal urge to reach out and touch the tree overwhelming you. But as you stepped closer, a voice rang out, low, deep, and ancient. Do you understand what you seek? You froze, the sound of the voice reverberating in your chest like a thunderclap. It wasn't the woman's voice, nor the voice of the creature you had defeated. It was something else, something older, deeper, a voice that seemed to come from the very heart of the forest itself. The voice continued, its tone growing louder, more insistent. You have passed the trial, yes. But the heart is not just power to be claimed. It is a force that demands balance, that feeds on the will of those who seek it. To claim the heart is to accept the burden of the forest. You must give something in return. You felt a surge of dread wash over you. The hunger, the power, the call of the heart, it had all felt so natural, so right. But now, standing before it, you understood what it truly meant. The heart demanded more than just a willing participant. It demanded sacrifice. It demanded the one thing that you had been trying to ignore, the thing that had brought you here in the first place. What will you give to the forest? The voice boomed, and the ground trembled beneath you. You stood there, your heart pounding, your mind racing. What could you give? The forest had already claimed you. The shadows, the creatures, the hunt, it had all become a part of you. But there was a cost to this power, a price that you had yet to understand. The trees around you seemed to sway, their branches creaking as if they were waiting for your answer, waiting for you to make the decision that would change everything. The air grew colder, heavier, and the scent of decay lingered in your nose, mixing with the sweet, intoxicating fragrance of the heart. You could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on you, the presence of the ancient trees, the creatures, the spirits. They were all waiting for you to choose. What would you give? The voice boomed again, this time sharper, more urgent. The forest takes what it needs. Are you ready to give everything? The hunger inside you flared again, stronger this time, more insistent. But there was something else too, something deeper, something darker. You knew in that moment that you had been brought here for a reason. The forest had chosen you, and now it was time to choose it back. You took a deep breath, stepping closer to the tree. Your hand, trembling slightly, reached out for the trunk. The moment your fingers touched the bark, a shock of energy ran through your body, and the ground beneath you shuddered once again. The heart pulsed in your chest, a deep, primal rhythm, and you felt yourself connecting to it as if it were a part of your own blood. The trees around you groaned, and the voice returned, low and grave. Then you are ready. The darkness closed in, and the world around you seemed to blur, the edges of reality shifting as you became one with the heart of the forest. The world around you seemed to collapse into the tree, its energy seeping into your bones, flooding your senses with an overwhelming rush of raw, untamed power. The moment your hand touched the bark, the very essence of the forest seemed to pulse in unison with your heartbeat. A deep hum reverberated through your chest, and for the first time, you truly felt connected to the forest, to the earth beneath your feet, and to the ancient spirits that had whispered to you in the shadows. This was no longer just a bond, it was a union, a merging of your very soul with the heart of the forest itself. The power surged through you like a torrent, searing its way down your spine and into your limbs, filling you with the knowledge of the forest's deepest secrets. You saw visions, flickers of life that had existed in these woods long before you had come. The trees, ancient and wise, had seen centuries pass, their roots spreading deep into the earth, pulling from the very essence of life itself. You could hear their whispers now, not in words, but in emotions, in feelings, in the deep connection that had always existed between the living and the land. The spirits of the forest filled your mind with their memories, their desires, and their hunger. For a brief moment, you felt as if you were drowning in the overwhelming flood of information. Stories from long before your time, the calls of the creatures that had once roamed freely, and the deep, unsettling feeling that there had always been something more, something hidden beneath the surface of the forest that you had never known. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the rush of power slowed, and the world around you shifted. The dark, swirling fog that had once clung to the trees seemed to lift, the oppressive weight of the air dissipating as the golden light from the heart pulsed stronger. It was as if the very earth itself had accepted you. The hunger that had filled your soul now seemed to settle, like a deep, echoing breath of the forest itself, calming the storm that had raged inside you. And yet, as the energy subsided, something remained, something darker, deeper, and more dangerous. The whispers of the forest spirits faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening in its stillness. The hunger, though no longer overwhelming, lingered at the edges of your mind, as though the forest was waiting for you to make the next move. You stepped back, your heart still racing, and the ground beneath you groaned in response. The ancient tree that had connected you to the heart of the forest seemed to watch you now, its glowing branches stretching upward like the fingers of a god reaching toward the sky. The shadows, once your allies, now seemed more distant, almost cold, as if they no longer trusted you. The voice, deep and omnipresent, returned. The bond is sealed, it rumbled, the very air vibrating with its power. You are now part of the forest, its guardian, its leader. The price has been paid, but there is more that you must face. Your breath caught in your throat as the ground beneath you shuddered again, this time with greater force. The trees around you began to shake, their massive trunks groaning under some unseen pressure. A low, rumbling growl echoed in the distance, deep from the heart of the forest, followed by another and then another. You could feel the creatures stirring, their eyes burning from the shadows as if they were waiting for something, or someone. But be warned, the voice continued, this time colder, more distant. The forest's hunger does not end with the bond. It will claim all who seek to control it, and you will not be exempt. The hunt is not over. It is only just beginning. The words settled into your soul like a chilling promise. You had embraced the forest, yes. You had conquered the trial, faced its trials, and claimed the heart as your own. But now you understood the true cost. The hunger was endless. The forest was eternal, and it would always demand something in return. Before you could process what the voice had said, the ground beneath you began to shift in earnest. The earth trembled as a dark shape emerged from the shadows, a figure so large it seemed to block out the light, its form indistinct but unmistakably massive. It was a creature of the forest, an ancient, forgotten thing that had lived in the darkest corners of this world long before the trees had reached their towering heights. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto you, burning like molten coals, its massive body twisting and shifting like smoke. Its limbs were covered in thick, bark-like scales, and its claws scraped the ground, sending tremors through the earth. It was a guardian, but not like the one you had defeated earlier. This was something far older, something more dangerous. You could feel its power, its hunger, radiating from it in waves, and you realized in that instant that it was not here to test you. It was here to claim you. You reached for the power that had been gifted to you, the pulse of the forest that now flowed through your veins, but it felt distant. The connection, once so strong, now seemed to waver, as though the forest itself was uncertain of you. The creature before you growled, its eyes narrowing, and the shadows around it seemed to dance with life as though they too were waiting for your next move. "You are the forest's new guardian," the voice said again, now a distant whisper, as if fading into the very fabric of the woods. "But to truly lead it, to command its creatures, you must face the one thing that even the heart of the forest cannot control: yourself." The creature lunged toward you, its massive form moving faster than you had anticipated, and in that moment, everything you had learned, the hunger, the darkness, the power, flared within you. The forest's pulse surged, filling you with an intense clarity, a cold certainty. This creature was not your enemy. It was a challenge, a test of your new power. The trees around you groaned, their roots writhing beneath the ground, and for the first time, you felt the weight of their presence, not as an ally but as a force to be reckoned with. The creature was the embodiment of the forest's primal strength, a reflection of what you had become. And now you had to prove your worth. The hunger inside you flared, stronger than before. It wasn't just a desire to consume. It was a desire to lead, to command, to become one with the forest, not as a servant, but as its master. With a primal roar, you stepped forward, your body moving like liquid, fluid and precise. The creature's claws swiped toward you, but you dodged with unnatural speed, your movements guided by the pulse of the forest that now beat through your very being. The creature snarled, its massive jaws snapping at you, but you were faster, the darkness of the forest swirling around you like an extension of yourself. And then, with a single motion, you reached out and grabbed the creature's massive jaw, pulling it toward you with a force that you hadn't known you possessed. Its eyes widened in shock as the connection between you and the forest deepened, and with a single push of your will, the creature froze, its body locking in place as if held by invisible chains. The forest's pulse surged again, and you felt it respond to you, its energy flowing through your limbs like fire. The creature, once an unstoppable force, now bowed to your command. Its massive form shuddered, and then, with a final growl, it retreated into the shadows, acknowledging your dominance. The world around you fell silent once more, and as you stood there, breathing heavily, you understood the true nature of your power. The forest had claimed you. The heart had bound you to it, and now it was your turn to lead. But the forest's hunger was endless. You had only just begun. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, decayed leaves, and the undeniable weight of the forest's presence, as if it was alive, breathing in unison with you. The pulse of the heart reverberated through your chest, its rhythm now your own. The creature, defeated and bent to your will, retreated into the shadows, but its presence lingered, as did the unsettling stillness that had overtaken the forest. The dark shape, once an imposing force, was now nothing more than a shadow in the deep woods, a reminder of what you had become. You stood in the clearing, alone now, save for the whispering trees and the distant sounds of the creatures that moved in the darkness. The path that had led you here seemed to dissolve into the blackness, the forest closing in on you, its secrets growing deeper, its hunger more palpable. The power of the heart coursed through you, but it was no longer a gift. It was a responsibility. You had claimed the forest's power, but with it came something far more ominous, the weight of its eternal hunger. As you breathed in the damp, thick air, the hunger inside you stirred once again, not for sustenance but for more power, more control, more dominance over the wilds. You had proven yourself worthy, but at what cost? The power of the forest, now bound to you, came with an understanding of its depths, its ancient truths, and its unrelenting hunger. The balance of life and death, growth and decay, it was all held within the forest's grasp, and now it was yours to command. But the price was steep. The heart of the forest had not just bound you to it. It had made you its keeper, its protector, its ruler. The creatures, the shadows, the very trees, they all looked to you for direction, for guidance, for the will to shape the forest's future. You were no longer just a wanderer in the woods. You were the forest's pulse, its beating heart. And the forest would test you as it had tested all who had come before you. The silence was broken by a low growl, distant but unmistakable. You turned toward the sound, your heightened senses attuned to the faintest shift in the air. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the soft crunch of leaves and the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. Your pulse quickened. The forest had not yet fully revealed itself to you. And then it emerged from the shadows. A massive creature, its body a hulking mass of twisted roots and bark, stood before you. Its eyes glowed faintly with an eerie amber light, its breath heavy and labored as it stepped into the clearing. This was no guardian like before. This was something far older, far more sinister. Its limbs were long and gnarled, covered in thick bark-like scales that seemed to shift and writhe like living wood. Its jaws were large and jagged, its teeth like twisted spikes, dripping with dark sap that glistened in the dim light. The creature's form shifted with every step, as if it were both a part of the forest and separate from it, a manifestation of its hunger. The creature's growl echoed through the forest, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in your bones. It was hungry, but not for flesh. No, this was the hunger of the forest itself, a need for power, for dominance, for control. And it was coming for you. You could feel the power surge inside you, the forest's heartbeat quickening as it responded to the creature's challenge. The hunger was a thing that had lived within the woods long before you, and it would not be satisfied by your dominance alone. It wanted more. It wanted to consume, to destroy, to reshape the world around it. The creature's amber eyes locked onto yours, and in that moment, you felt something stir within you, a deep, primal fear. This was no test of strength. This was a test of your will, your ability to control the hunger that surged within you, to shape the forest's will to your own. You were not just facing a creature of the woods. You were facing the forest itself, its dark, insatiable hunger that you had unwittingly inherited. For a moment you hesitated. The weight of your new responsibility pressed heavily upon you, and the gnawing hunger inside you seemed to grow, as though it were pulling you toward the creature, toward the battle. You could feel the power calling to you, urging you to claim what was yours. But you knew that to give in would mean to lose yourself completely, to become nothing more than another ravenous creature of the woods, another twisted reflection of the forest's eternal hunger. The creature's growl grew louder, more aggressive. Its body seemed to swell with power as it advanced, its claws raking across the earth, leaving deep gouges in the soil. Its eyes blazed with an intensity that threatened to consume you, and for a moment, it felt as if the very forest itself was closing in around you, its roots wrapping around your legs, its branches reaching for your throat. But then, something shifted inside you. You were not just part of the forest. You were its leader. You had claimed its heart. You had proven your worth. And now, it was time to prove that you could control the hunger, to bend it to your will rather than be consumed by it. With a deep, steadying breath, you reached within, pulling the full weight of the forest's power into yourself. The darkness, the shadows, the creatures, they all pulsed with you as if you had become their master, their guide. The hunger surged within you, but you harnessed it, focused it, made it your weapon. The creature lunged. You met its charge head-on. With the force of the forest's power at your command, you struck. Your hand shot out, and in an instant, the very earth beneath you responded, the roots rising up from the ground like living snakes, wrapping around the creature's limbs, holding it in place. The creature howled, its jaws snapping at you, but the roots held fast, their grip unbreakable. The creature's glowing eyes filled with rage, but you did not flinch. You could feel the power of the heart in your chest, and with a single, commanding thought, the roots tightened, drawing the creature closer, forcing it to its knees. The shadows around you seemed to dance with the energy you had summoned, and the creature's struggles began to slow as it was bound by the very forest it had once been a part of. Enough. The word slipped from your lips, not with fear, but with an authority that sent a chill through the forest. The creature froze, its amber eyes wide with shock and submission. The forest, silent and watchful, seemed to hold its breath as you stood there, your hand outstretched, controlling the very land beneath you. The creature, now fully subdued, trembled at your feet, its massive body still but for the rise and fall of its labored breath. "You are the forest ruler now," the voice from the heart said again, its tone almost approving. "But remember this, the hunger will never cease. It will never be satisfied. The forest will always test you. It will always demand more." The creature, defeated, slunk back into the shadows, its massive form disappearing into the darkness. And as the silence returned, you stood in the clearing, your heart pounding, the weight of the forest's power heavy on your shoulders. The hunger had been momentarily quelled, but you knew deep down that it would never truly end. The forest's will was vast, its appetite eternal, and now it was yours to command. You had taken the first step, but the path ahead was long, and the hunger would always be waiting. The stillness of the forest pressed against you like a thick, suffocating blanket. The pulse of the heart, once steady and comforting, now felt erratic, as if it too were uncertain of its place in the world. The hunger inside you, though not overwhelming, had not faded entirely. It had taken root deep within your chest, a constant reminder that this power, this responsibility, came with a price. The trees, once your allies, now seemed to stand apart, watching you with a new, cautious distance. The creatures of the forest, the dark spirits, all of them, they were waiting. Waiting for you to falter, waiting for you to prove that you could truly control what you had awakened. You stepped forward, your feet pressing into the soft earth, the roots of the ancient trees brushing against your legs like cold fingers. The moon was barely visible through the thick canopy of leaves, but there was a glow in the air, a faint pulse of light that seemed to emanate from the forest itself, a reflection of the heart's energy. The wind stirred, rustling the leaves, carrying with it the scent of something distant, something far older. It was a scent of decay, of death and rebirth, of the eternal cycle that the forest held in its grasp. The forest was alive in ways that went beyond the physical. It was a living, breathing entity that thrived on balance, on the cycle of life and death. And you were now part of that cycle, the heartbeat that guided it, the pulse that kept it alive. But the question remained, could you balance the hunger that flowed through you with the needs of the forest itself? The creatures that followed you, the dark shapes in the shadows, were more than just beasts. They were echoes of the forest's will, reflections of its hunger, its desire to grow, to consume. And you had become their leader. Their purpose was now yours to command. But at what cost? A sudden rustling sound broke through the silence, sharp and unnerving. Your body tensed, your senses on high alert. Something was moving through the underbrush, something big. The familiar growl, low and guttural, echoed from the darkness. It was a sound that sent a chill down your spine, a sound that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand at attention. You weren't alone. The growl grew louder, closer, and the shadows seemed to shift around you, forming into shapes that were not quite beasts, but not quite shadows either. There was a fluidity to them, an unnatural grace that made them almost indistinguishable from the forest itself. These creatures were not the guardians you had faced before. These were something else, something older, far more dangerous. They were manifestations of the hunger that had always been a part of the forest. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward. It was tall, its form shadowed and indistinct, but you could feel the presence of it, the weight of its gaze, its cold, predatory energy. Its eyes burned with an amber glow, the same as the creatures you had tamed, the same as the heart of the forest. But there was something different about this one, something that set it apart. "You are not what you once were," it said, its voice deep and ancient, like the earth itself had spoken. The sound of its voice seemed to shake the very ground beneath you, vibrating through your chest. The words settled on you like a weight, a truth that was undeniable. You were no longer the person who had wandered into the forest. You had changed. You had become the forest's pulse, its heart. And with that, the hunger within you had become something far more dangerous. The creature stepped closer, its amber eyes never leaving yours. It was testing you, probing your power, your resolve. It was a challenge, one that you could not ignore. This was not a creature that would bend to your will with ease. It was a force of nature, a being born from the depths of the forest's primal hunger. "You lead them now," the creature rumbled, its voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But do you know what that means?" You clenched your fists, feeling the power surge within you, but the hunger inside you flared once again, stronger than before. It was a gnawing, insistent feeling, one that tugged at your very soul, urging you to consume, to take, to command. "I know what I've become," you said, your voice steady, though the weight of the creature's gaze pressed heavily on you. "And I know what the forest demands." The creature studied you for a long moment, its eyes narrowing. Then, without another word, it turned and disappeared into the shadows, its massive form vanishing into the darkness. But the tension, the unease remained. The forest was watching you, the creatures waiting, the shadows lingering in the corners of your vision. You were no longer just a wanderer in the woods. You were the forest's ruler, its guardian, its leader. But the path ahead was not one of peace. It was one of constant balance, of constantly feeding the hunger within you while keeping the forest's power in check. The creatures, the shadows, they were all a part of the balance, and it was your job to guide them. The wind picked up again, swirling around you, carrying with it the faintest sound of movement, something large, something that moved with purpose. The hunger inside you stirred once more, but this time, you held it in check. The power of the forest was yours to command, but it was a double-edged sword. You could not let it consume you. Not yet. You began to walk, your feet falling into the rhythm of the forest's heartbeat, each step carrying you further into the unknown. The shadows around you shifted, and the creatures of the forest followed, their eyes glowing from the darkness, their forms just beyond your reach. They were waiting for you to lead them, waiting for you to show them the way. But you could feel it, the weight of the responsibility that had fallen on your shoulders. The forest's hunger was endless. The creatures would never stop following you. And no matter how far you went, no matter how much power you claimed, there would always be something more to face, something more to prove. And deep within you, the hunger echoed. It would never fade. The heart of the forest had claimed you, and now it was yours to tame. The forest had become an extension of yourself, its every pulse resonating deep within your bones. The hunger inside you, once an unruly force, had become a part of your being, tethered to the very core of your existence. Each breath you took now seemed to carry the weight of the ancient woods, each step you made echoing with the whispers of the trees. The forest was alive in a way you had never understood, and you were no longer an outsider. You were its keeper, its ruler, its heartbeat. But with that power came a deeper, more troubling realization. The forest's hunger would never be satiated. As you walked deeper into the woods, the shadows seemed to stretch around you, twisting and curling like living things, responding to your every move. The creatures that once watched from the corners of your vision now followed at your heels, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness, their bodies barely visible in the shifting shadows. They were yours now, bound to you by the very essence of the forest. But they were not passive. No, they were eager, waiting for your command, hungry for what you had promised them. The wind carried the faint scent of decay and new growth, a reminder that the forest was ever-changing, ever-evolving, like a living organism that was constantly shifting and adapting. It was a place where life and death were in constant conflict, a place where every step forward came at the cost of something else. The trees creaked and groaned, their ancient bodies swaying in response to your presence. The forest had grown accustomed to your power, but it was still watching you, waiting for the moment when you would falter, when the hunger would consume you. Ahead, the forest opened into a clearing, and you felt it before you saw it. The air grew thick with a sense of unease, as if something ancient, something powerful, was watching you. The ground was soft here, almost spongy, as if it were soaked in centuries of rain, the moss underfoot squelching with each step. The trees around the clearing were twisted, their bark blackened and scarred, as though they had witnessed countless storms, countless battles. And at the center of it all, there was something that should not have been, something that did not belong in the forest, a presence that stood apart from the natural world. A figure, dark and motionless, stood at the center of the clearing. Its form was humanoid, but its features were indistinct, like a shadow made flesh. Its body was covered in what appeared to be thick, vine-like armor, wrapping around its limbs in patterns that seemed to shift and change as you looked at them. It stood perfectly still, as though waiting for something. Waiting for you. You stopped at the edge of the clearing, the hairs on the back of your neck prickling with the intensity of the air. The figure did not move, did not acknowledge your presence, but you could feel its power, its presence like a weight pressing down on you. The hunger inside you stirred, a primal desire to consume, to claim the power that stood before you. It was a challenge, one that would test not only your strength but your control. You had come far, but this was different. The forest was no longer just a series of trees and creatures to be tamed. It had become a force in its own right, and you had to prove yourself to it, prove that you were worthy of the power it had given you. The shadowed figure was its test. The creature, if it could even be called that, made no sound as you stepped into the clearing, but you could feel it. The very air around it seemed to thrum with a strange, unsettling energy, a pulse that felt like it was coming from the earth itself. It was the forest's power, yes, but twisted, distorted into something darker, something more dangerous. The forest had birthed it, but it did not belong here. It was an anomaly, a shadow born from the hunger that had always existed in the woods. The figure finally moved, its limbs shifting like tendrils of dark vines, and it turned to face you. Its eyes, though hidden beneath the cloak of darkness, seemed to gleam with an ancient intelligence, an awareness of who you were. Its voice, when it spoke, was not a voice at all but a presence, deep and low like a rumbling in the earth. "So, the heart has chosen you," it intoned, its voice reverberating in your chest. "But do you understand what that truly means?" The air grew colder as it stepped forward, and the hunger inside you flared again, stronger than before. The urge to fight, to dominate, surged within you, but you held it back. This was a test, a trial. You had to prove that you could control the hunger, not let it control you. "I understand more than you think," you said, your voice steady despite the torrent of emotions inside you. "I've embraced the forest. I've taken its heart into my own. And I will lead it." The figure's lips curled into a twisted smile, though its face remained shrouded in darkness. "Lead?" it asked, its tone mocking. "The forest cannot be led. It is a force of nature, a wild, uncontrollable thing. You may think you control it, but it is you who are bound by it, bound by its hunger. Do you know what it truly asks of you?" You clenched your fists, the power of the forest surging through your veins like a living thing. The hunger roared within you, pushing you to claim your dominance over the creature, to prove that you were the master here. But something held you back. There was an ancient wisdom in the figure's words, a truth you could not deny. "What it asks of me," you murmured, your voice quieter this time. "It asks for balance, life and death, hunger and growth, and I will give it. I will control it." The figure's smile faded, and it stepped closer, its form twisting and shifting with every movement. "You do not understand yet, but you will. The heart of the forest is not just a gift, it is a curse. It will twist you, change you, until you are no longer sure of where you end and the forest begins. The hunger is eternal, and it will consume you if you let it." The words stung, but they rang with a chilling truth. The forest's hunger had claimed you, and now you were bound to it. But there was still a chance to maintain control, to prove that you could tame its insatiable appetite. The battle for your soul had just begun. The shadowed figure paused for a moment, its eyes gleaming with a knowing glint. And then, without another word, it disappeared into the darkness, leaving you standing alone in the clearing. The hunger inside you churned, but this time you forced it back. You had to keep control. The forest had claimed you, but it was not going to claim everything. Not yet. The creatures around you once again were watching, waiting for your next move. The forest had tested you, but the trial was far from over. The hunger would never cease. But now, it was up to you to decide how far you would go to feed it. The forest seemed to breathe with you, its ancient pulse quickening with each step you took. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, yet there was something else now, something sharper, the scent of power. The hunger that roiled inside you was no longer a mere craving. It was a presence, a force that had woven itself into the very fabric of your being. The forest had claimed you, but now you were both bound and burdened by its will. You had tasted the power of the heart. You had felt its call, the thrum of its energy coursing through you like a river that could not be contained. But now, the weight of it was settling in, the truth of the creature's words ringing louder in your mind. The hunger would consume you if you allowed it. The clearing where the shadowed figure had stood felt different now. The air was still, heavy with anticipation. The trees around you stood silent and unmoving, their twisted branches heavy with an unspoken secret. The forest was watching, its creatures waiting in the wings, unseen but ever present. You could feel their eyes on you, their gazes like pinpricks against your skin. It was as if the forest itself had become a living thing, its every part attuned to your presence. The roots underfoot seemed to shift and twist as you walked, creeping toward you like eager tendrils, desperate to touch you. The shadows danced around you, taking on strange, haunting shapes, as if the very darkness was waiting to see if you could master it. But there was one thing that set the forest apart from the creatures you had encountered before. It did not care for your strength, your power, your will. The forest was indifferent to your ambitions. It would never be tamed. It would never obey. It was not a thing to be ruled, but a force to be respected. The true challenge, you now understood, was not in conquering it, but in coexisting with it, finding a balance between the hunger and the will, the light and the dark. And so you pressed on. The path ahead was uncertain, the forest thickening as you moved deeper into its heart. The shadows grew longer, heavier, as the night began to stretch out. The wind that had once been a soft, whispering breeze was now a biting cold, howling through the branches above. The moonlight filtered through the trees in jagged slivers, casting eerie shadows on the ground. A soft rustling sound caught your attention, and instinctively you stopped. Your senses, heightened by the bond you shared with the forest, snapped to attention. Something was nearby, something large. The shadows shifted again, and this time the shape of a creature emerged from the darkness. It was different from the others. Its form was impossibly tall, towering above the trees, its long, sinewy limbs covered in dark, bark-like armor. Its eyes, glowing a faint green, reflected the pale moonlight as it fixed its gaze on you. The creature moved forward, its massive form disturbing the ground with each step. It was not a creature you had seen before. It was something ancient, a being born from the deepest recesses of the forest's hunger. It did not speak, but the air seemed to hum with its presence, a deep, guttural energy that vibrated in your chest. It was waiting for you to react, for you to make the first move. You could feel the tension, the power, as the forest held its breath, watching you. The hunger stirred within you, an undeniable pull that urged you to confront the creature, to take it down, to feed. But you held steady. You had learned that power was not simply about domination. The forest had tested you and you had passed. But now it was time to control that power. "I am not here to destroy you," you said, your voice carrying through the clearing, steady and calm. "I am here to understand, to learn how to coexist with the forest, to lead not through force but through balance." The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as if considering your words. The wind shifted, the trees creaked, and for a moment, there was only silence. The hunger within you flared once more, but this time you embraced it. You allowed it to flow through you, to guide you, but not to overtake you. This was the test, not of strength but of restraint. The creature, after what seemed like an eternity, lowered its massive head, its eyes dimming to a soft glow. It took a step back, then another, and finally, it turned, retreating into the shadows from which it had come. For a moment, you were left standing in the clearing, the weight of the forest's power pressing down on you. The hunger, though still present, was quieter now. You had proven something, not just to the creature but to the forest itself. You were not its master, but its keeper. You were part of the forest's eternal cycle, and it was up to you to maintain the balance between hunger and growth, life and decay. But there was still so much you did not understand. As the creature disappeared into the shadows, a new presence made itself known. It was not physical but mental, a whisper in your mind, soft but insistent. You had heard this voice before, but it had never spoken to you like this. "You have passed another trial," it said, the voice a murmur like the rustling of leaves. "But there is more to come. You are not yet ready to lead the forest, not yet ready to claim the power that flows through its roots. The true test is not in defeating your enemies. It is in mastering yourself." You felt the words wash over you, and for a moment, the weight of them threatened to crush you. You had thought that claiming the heart of the forest was the end of your journey, that you had already proven yourself. But the voice was clear, the trials were far from over. The hunger inside you surged again, and with it, the understanding that this was just the beginning. The forest was vast, and you were only beginning to scratch the surface of its secrets. "The heart of the forest is but one piece of the puzzle," the voice continued. "You must learn to navigate its darkness, to harness its power without letting it consume you. The true test of the forest ruler is not what you take, but what you give." The words hung in the air like a dark promise, and you knew with a sickening certainty that the trials would only grow harder. The hunger, though contained for now, would never stop calling to you. And as the voice faded into the night, the forest around you seemed to shift again, its trees stretching higher, its shadows growing deeper. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. You had only begun to face the true power of the forest, and the hunger would be with you every step of the way. The wind howled through the trees as the whispers of the forest deepened. The path ahead felt like it was pulling you toward something, but you didn't know what. The forest, once an ally, now felt like a labyrinth of shifting shadows, and you were its chosen path. But being chosen came with a price. You had taken the heart of the forest, and with it came not only the power to command, but the burden of its hunger, its thirst for more. And it was that hunger that gnawed at your every thought, driving you forward into the unknown. The voice from the heart, cryptic and full of foreboding, echoed in your mind, a constant reminder that you had only begun your journey. "The true test is not what you take, but what you give," it had said, and its words echoed in the stillness around you. What could you possibly give? The hunger roared within, demanding more. How could you balance it? You tried to focus on the forest's other voices, the ones that had once seemed comforting, guiding you through the underbrush. But now they seemed distant, muted. The spirits of the woods, once so eager to share their wisdom, were no longer as clear. Their whispers were now lost in a sea of darkness, tangled in the roots and branches that stretched above and below you, obscured by the endless void of the forest. The creatures that followed you, shadows in the corner of your vision, the glowing eyes that gleamed from the darkness, had become your constant companions, but you no longer felt their loyalty. Instead, you felt the weight of their hunger pressing against you, felt them watching, waiting for you to slip, to falter. You could feel the pulse of the forest beneath your feet, its rhythm in your bones, but it was no longer a steady heartbeat. It had become erratic, like the beat of a wounded animal, trembling in the dark. The earth groaned beneath you, and the roots curled and shifted like snakes, restless and yearning for something, your command, your control, your hunger. You had heard the creatures speak in their own way, the whispers of the shadows, the growls in the distance, the screech of creatures hidden deep in the trees, but never before had you felt their expectation. The forest wanted something from you now, something far more than just your strength. It wanted sacrifice. The trees around you groaned and creaked, their branches bending unnaturally as if reaching out toward you, drawing closer, closing in. The shadows that clung to the trunks seemed to ripple, flickering like flames. It was as if the forest itself had become alive with a singular thought, a desire to test you once more. It had been patient, watching, observing, but now the forest demanded action, and you were the one who had to answer. The path ahead opened into another clearing, but this one felt different. The air was thick with mist, and the ground beneath your feet was slick with something more than just rainwater, something alive. It shimmered with a faint, eerie glow, as though the earth itself was being transformed, twisted, changed. And in the center of this clearing, a great stone slab stood, ancient and covered in moss, its surface marked with symbols you did not recognize. For a moment you thought you heard something, an ancient voice, distant yet familiar, calling from the depths of the earth, from deep within the slab. It was the same voice you had heard before, the one that had whispered through the trees, through the shadows. But now it seemed different, urgent, desperate. As you stepped closer, the ground seemed to shift beneath your feet, the earth groaning in protest. The symbols on the stone began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, until they burned like fire. The forest itself seemed to bend toward the stone, its roots twisting around the slab, its branches reaching out to touch it. It was as if the very fabric of the woods was converging on this point, this one place where the earth, the hunger, and the power all came together. The voice, now louder, echoed in your mind. The hunger must be fed. The forest requires balance. But first, it must take something. The words froze you in place. What did it mean? What could the forest take from you that it had not already claimed? A flicker of light caught your eye. The stone slab shimmered, its surface cracking open, revealing something dark beneath, something alive. From the fissures in the stone, a shadowed figure emerged, its form cloaked in the mist that now swirled around the clearing. Its eyes glowed with the same eerie green light that had filled the creature you had faced before. But this creature was different. It was not of flesh or bone, but of shadow, of the very essence of the forest's hunger. The hunger within you flared in response. You could feel it, the connection between you and the shadowed figure. It was not a creature to be defeated. No, this was something more. It was a manifestation of the hunger itself, a dark reflection of what you had become. It was the forest's true test. The hunger feeds on more than flesh, the voice whispered, now clear in your mind, as though the forest itself was speaking through the figure. It feeds on sacrifice. You must choose, will you feed the hunger or will you tame it? The shadowed figure stepped forward, its form becoming more defined, more solid. Its eyes bore into you, a deep, endless abyss that seemed to pull at your soul, drawing you in. You reached for the power inside you, the energy of the heart of the forest, the connection you had forged with the land, the creatures, the shadows. You felt it surge within you, but now it was no longer a gift. It was a burden. The hunger roared inside you, demanding to be fed, and you could feel the weight of it pressing against your chest. The creature loomed closer, its shadow stretching longer as it approached. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Everything, every root, every leaf, every shadow, waited for your answer. The hunger was there, inside you, and it was waiting to consume everything. You took a deep breath, forcing back the urge to yield, to give in to the hunger's call. This was the moment. This was your choice. Would you feed the hunger, embracing the forest's eternal thirst? Or would you tame it, controlling the force that had become a part of you, bending it to your will? The creature stopped before you, its presence overwhelming. It tilted its head as if awaiting your decision. The pulse of the forest surged within you, louder now, a deep, reverberating sound that filled the clearing. The hunger clawed at you, demanding release, but you fought it down, clinging to the edge of the power that had granted you dominion over the woods. Finally, you spoke, your voice steady despite the storm raging inside you. I will tame it. I will lead the forest, not be consumed by it. The creature's eyes narrowed. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, as if satisfied by your resolve, it faded back into the shadows, its form melting into the mist, leaving you alone with the stone slab and the forest that was waiting for your next move. The hunger still stirred within you, but now you knew the next step. The forest had tested you once more and you had passed, but the trials were far from over. The hunger would always be there, lurking in the shadows, whispering in the wind. But you would not give in. Not yet. You turned and began to walk deeper into the forest, knowing that every step forward brought you closer to the truth. The heart of the forest had bound you to it, but now it was time to prove that you could master the hunger. And as the shadows closed in behind you, you couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was watching, waiting for you to slip, to falter. Because it knew something that you didn't. The hunger never truly fades. It only waits. The air had become colder, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when you would slip. The hunger still gnawed at the edges of your consciousness, persistent and unrelenting. Each step you took, each movement you made, seemed to echo through the woods, resonating with the ancient energy that surged beneath the earth. The forest's pulse beat in time with your own heart, and in those moments of silence, you could feel it. Every root, every leaf, every shadow around you was alive, attuned to your presence. But despite the oppressive weight of the hunger, there was something else. Something growing within you, buried beneath the power of the forest's heart. It was a realization. You had not yet truly understood the forest. You had only tasted the surface, felt its pulse, but you had not grasped its true nature. The forest was not a thing to be tamed, not a thing to be controlled. It was a force that could not be denied. You could guide it, yes, but at what cost? The further you walked, the denser the trees became, their trunks thickening, their branches intertwining above like a canopy of darkness. The forest had transformed in the hours you had spent in its heart. It was no longer the welcoming woods of your first steps. Now it felt like a labyrinth, its paths shifting and changing with every turn, as if the very landscape had grown restless. The wind had died down, and the only sound that remained was the steady, rhythmic pounding of your own footsteps. But there was something else, a hum beneath your feet. It wasn't the usual pulse of the forest, the steady heartbeat that had once felt like a guiding force. No, this was something darker, something older, something that had lain dormant beneath the surface for far too long. Ahead, the trees parted, revealing a narrow, winding path leading deeper into the forest. It was a path you had not seen before, one that was not part of the usual forest. The air here felt colder still, a biting chill that sank into your bones. The mist had thickened, swirling around the edges of the path like a living thing, crawling up your legs, clinging to your skin. The hunger inside you flared once more, but this time it was different. It was no longer a gnawing, endless craving. It was something else, a dread. A feeling that you were being pulled towards something you did not fully understand. You hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on you. The forest had become a thing of shadows, of hidden dangers, and this path, this hollowed path, felt like a place of reckoning. The whispers of the trees had gone quiet, the forest holding its breath in anticipation. You knew that this was a place you were meant to go. You could feel it in your bones, in the very core of the hunger that now twisted inside you. With a final breath, you took the first step into the mist. As you walked deeper, the air seemed to grow even heavier, the shadows growing thicker around you. The path twisted and turned in ways that didn't seem possible, the trees stretching farther into the darkness as if reaching for you. The forest had changed, but this place, it was not just part of the forest. It was a thing apart, something that had existed before the trees, before the earth, before the heart of the forest had claimed you. The hunger inside you pulsed violently now, an ache that was both physical and mental, as if it were tied to something deep within the earth itself. The deeper you walked, the more intense it became. The hunger was no longer just a thing that you could control, it was part of you, inextricably linked to your very being. You could feel it moving through you like a current, drawing you forward. Then ahead you saw it. A towering structure rose out of the mist, its silhouette black against the dim light that filtered through the trees. It was a lodge, but not one you had ever seen before. It was ancient, its wood dark and twisted, as if the very forest had grown around it, embracing it like a forgotten memory. The structure seemed to breathe, its walls creaking and groaning as if alive. The hunger within you stirred, pulsing in time with the steady rhythm of the house, the rhythm of the forest itself. You approached cautiously, your senses heightened as you drew closer to the lodge. It stood at the edge of the clearing, surrounded by tall, gnarled trees that seemed to lean inward, as if protecting it from the outside world. The door to the lodge was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out into the darkness. It beckoned you forward, pulling you in with an almost magnetic force. You knew this place. You had never been here before, yet it felt as though you had walked this path countless times. The hunger surged again, stronger this time, clawing at your insides as if it, too, knew what awaited within. The door creaked as you pushed it open, stepping inside. The air inside the lodge was thick with the scent of damp wood, old earth, and something else, something you couldn't quite place. The inside of the lodge was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a fire burning in a hearth at the far end of the room. The flames danced, casting eerie shadows against the walls. The space was vast, yet there was a feeling of claustrophobia, as if the very air was pressing in on you. The lodge was filled with old, forgotten relics. Furniture that had long since succumbed to decay, rusted tools that lay forgotten in the corners, and strange symbols carved into the wooden beams above. But the most unsettling thing was the presence, the feeling that you were not alone. The hunger inside you flared again, and for the briefest of moments you felt something, someone, watching you from the shadows. And then you heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a whispering wind but deeper, more resonant, as if the very lodge was speaking. The sound grew louder, clearer, until you realized it was not the wind at all. It was a voice. A deep, ancient voice that seemed to echo through the very bones of the lodge, reverberating in your chest, in your mind. You have come. The words hung in the air like a command, their weight pressing down on you. The hunger surged again, demanding that you move forward, that you seek out whatever lay within. But something held you back. Something inside you knew that the true nature of the forest, and the hunger within, lay within this very place. You could feel it now, the balance that the forest had spoken of. The hunger was here in this lodge, but it was not the forest's hunger. It was something older, something more primal, and it was waiting for you. The voice, deep and ancient, reverberated through the very walls of the lodge, echoing like a dark prophecy in your mind. You have come, it said again, its tone unmistakably knowing, as though it had been waiting for you all along. The hunger inside you stirred, responding to the voice, to the power that thrummed through the very air of this forsaken place. There was something alive here, something that connected the lodge to the pulse of the forest itself. It was as though the earth and the trees had grown around it, enveloping it like a secret buried deep beneath the surface. The fire in the hearth flickered and sputtered, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own accord, as if the shadows themselves were alive. You stepped forward, the weight of your every movement heavy with the awareness that something awaited you. The air inside the lodge was thick, musty with age, but beneath that there was something else, something darker. It was the scent of decay, yes, but also the scent of something ancient, a deep, primordial presence that seemed to hum in the back of your mind. The hunger, now a constant companion, tugged at you, urging you to delve deeper, to uncover whatever lay hidden beneath the stone and wood. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow, stretching toward you as if the darkness itself were reaching out. The hunger inside you responded, its pull growing stronger with each passing second. But you held steady, fighting the urge to let it take control. The creature's warning echoed in your thoughts. The hunger feeds on more than flesh. It feeds on sacrifice. But you didn't know what to sacrifice, not yet. You couldn't let the hunger define you. Not here. Not in this place. The fire crackled in the hearth, sending up a spray of sparks, and as if on cue, the shadows shifted, swirling around the room like tendrils of smoke. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its form was indistinct, fluid, like a silhouette that could not be pinned down, flickering in and out of existence like a nightmare that refused to be shaken. The hunger inside you flared again, recognizing the presence for what it was. A creature born from the same darkness that had claimed your soul, a manifestation of the very thing that had made you its chosen vessel. But this figure was different. There was a familiarity to it, something deep inside you knew. You seek the heart, the figure spoke, its voice low, a raspy whisper that scraped across your mind. You seek to understand the hunger, the forest, and yourself. But can you truly comprehend what lies beneath? The words were not a question. They were an accusation. You stepped forward, your pulse quickening as you looked at the figure, the shadows twisting around its form like a living cloak. It was as if the creature was the embodiment of the forest's true nature. The hunger, the dark, the twisted path that lay just beyond the veil of reason. You could feel it, the pull of it, drawing you in, wrapping you in its embrace. "I know what you are," you said, your voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through your veins. "I am the one who has taken the heart. I am the one who has walked the path of the forest's hunger. And I have come to understand what lies beyond it." The figure tilted its head, its movements fluid and unsettling. It stepped closer, its presence overwhelming yet distant. There was something ancient in the way it moved, as if it had seen the rise and fall of countless worlds, countless lives. The hunger inside you stirred, but this time you resisted it. You were not the same as when you had entered the forest. You had changed, and with that change came the strength to control the force that had once threatened to consume you. "The heart does not belong to you," the figure whispered, its voice an echo in the hollow lodge. "The heart belongs to the forest, to the cycle. You are but a vessel, a fleeting moment in the endless hunger. You will be consumed in the end, like all who seek to claim power beyond their grasp." The fire in the hearth sputtered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and curl around the room. The lodge itself groaned, as if protesting the presence of this being, or perhaps it was protesting your very existence within it. The hunger within you surged again, violent this time, gnawing at your every thought, pushing you to take action. You could feel the power of the forest, the strength of the heart that now pulsed inside you, and the creature before you, this manifestation of shadow and hunger, was both a test and a warning. "I will not be consumed," you said, the words coming from a place deep within you, a place that resonated with the power you had claimed. "I will control this hunger. I will lead the forest. I will prove that I am more than just a vessel for its will." The figure paused, its eyes narrowing as it regarded you. There was a long, heavy silence that stretched between you, the weight of its ancient gaze pressing down on you. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse, the air thickening with an unspoken understanding, a knowledge that had been hidden from you until now. "You do not understand the true nature of the hunger," it murmured. "The forest is not something you can lead. The hunger is not something you can control. It is a part of the earth itself, of the cycle of life and death. You may wield it for a time, but it will never be tamed. Not by you. Not by anyone." The words cut through you like a knife, but you held your ground. The hunger roared in response, a deep, primal force that threatened to overtake you, to consume you, to swallow your will and your soul. But this time you fought it back, pushing against the weight of the dark presence that loomed before you. "I am the forest's pulse," you said, your voice stronger now, resonating with the power that had grown within you. "I am its heart, its soul. I will not let it consume me. I will not let it consume anyone." For a moment, the creature's form flickered, its shadowed body wavering like smoke. The hunger inside you surged again, but this time you embraced it. You felt its dark power flow through you, but you did not let it overwhelm you. Instead, you guided it, bending it to your will, wrapping it around your very being, making it a part of who you were. You were not a vessel for the forest's hunger anymore. You were the hunger. The figure recoiled, its form warping, twisting as if caught in a struggle of its own. "No," it hissed, its voice strained. "You are not ready." But before it could finish, the shadows recoiled, pulling the creature back into the dark recesses of the lodge, disappearing into the mist that clung to the walls like cobwebs. Silence followed, an oppressive quiet that wrapped around you like a shroud. The fire in the hearth burned lower, its light flickering, casting strange shapes against the walls. And there, in the center of the lodge, you were left alone with your hunger, with the power that had claimed you and transformed you into something more, something dangerous, something incomplete. The hunger inside you was no longer just a desire for control. It was a call, a pulse that reverberated through your very being. It was the heartbeat of the forest, the echo of the land itself. And as you stood there, the weight of what you had become settled over you like a heavy cloak. The forest had no more answers to give you. The path ahead was yours alone to walk. The silence in the lodge was deafening. The shadows no longer moved, and the weight of the air seemed to press down on you like a physical force. You stood alone in the dim light, your breath slow and steady, the pulse of hunger within you now a constant thrum beneath your ribs. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to little more than embers, the room now cast in eerie, flickering shadows that seemed to stretch into corners where no light could reach. The creature, the manifestation of the forest's hunger, had disappeared, its form dissolving into the shadows as if it had never been there. But the hunger, the power that surged through your veins, remained, and it was growing. It was no longer a whisper, no longer a gnawing feeling at the edge of your mind. It was everything. The air you breathed, the ground beneath your feet, The very essence of your being was filled with it. The voice that had spoken to you, the ancient voice of the forest, lingered in the back of your mind, its words echoing through the hollows of your thoughts. You are but a vessel, a fleeting moment in the endless hunger. The forest is not something you can lead. The hunger is not something you can control. The weight of those words pressed on your chest, squeezing the air from your lungs. The hunger wanted. It didn't care for your intentions, your control. It wanted to consume, to spread, to devour everything in its path. And you could feel it, like a vast, endless current, pulling at the edges of your consciousness. The lodge itself seemed to be aware of you, its walls creaking and groaning, as though it were alive, breathing with the rhythm of the forest. The dark wood of the beams above seemed to pulse, faint veins of shadow stretching along them, whispering ancient secrets you could not fully comprehend. The very floor beneath your feet felt like it was shifting, like the ground was moving to pull you deeper into the heart of the forest, deeper into the hunger that had become your own. You could feel it now, the presence of the forest itself, like a heavy fog surrounding you. The trees outside the lodge were not just trees anymore. They were watching, their branches creaking as they swayed in the wind, their shadows dancing against the windows. The forest was alive, its heart beating in time with your own, and it knew that you had taken its heart for your own. It knew that you were its chosen, its keeper, but it also knew that this power came at a cost. The hunger surged once more, and you knew without a doubt that it would never stop. It had claimed you, consumed you, and now it demanded more. The forest was patient. It had waited for centuries, millennia, to find a vessel that could carry its burden. But it was no longer just about the hunger. It was about the balance. You turned, the weight of the decision settling over you. This lodge, this place of darkness and decay, was more than just an empty structure. It was the true heart of the forest. The shadows in the corners were not mere tricks of the light. They were memories, echoes of everything the forest had ever known. The hunger you felt within you was not just yours, it was a part of something much older, much more dangerous. It had existed long before you had come to this place, and it would continue long after you were gone. As you stepped forward, the floor beneath you shifted again, groaning with the weight of time. The walls seemed to close in around you, the shadows growing deeper, darker. The fire had all but extinguished, leaving you in near total darkness, save for the faint glow of the dying embers. But there, in the far corner of the room, something caught your eye. A doorway, partially concealed by an old, tattered curtain, beckoned you. It was narrow, almost hidden, and yet it seemed to call to you, drawing your attention as though it had been waiting for you all along. Without thinking, you walked toward it, your footsteps slow, deliberate, as if the lodge itself was holding its breath, waiting for your next move. The hunger inside you pressed against your chest, urging you to go faster, to reach the door. But you ignored it, holding yourself in check. This was no longer about yielding to the forest's call. This was about understanding it. You pushed the curtain aside, and the door creaked open with a slow, mournful sound, as though it hadn't been opened in centuries. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, but there was something different about it. Something alive. The very air felt thick, like it was laden with the weight of the forest's memories. You stepped inside, the door closing behind you with a heavy thud. The room was vast, its walls lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient books, scrolls, and objects that hummed with a strange, forgotten power. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and old wood, a smell that made your skin crawl and your mind race with possibilities. And there, at the center of the room, was a pedestal. On it lay a single glowing object, an orb, its surface swirling with shadows and light. The orb pulsed with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. The hunger inside you stirred again, louder this time, as if it recognized the power of what lay before you. The orb was calling to you. It was the heart of the forest, the source of the power that had claimed you. But it was not just an object. It was alive, a manifestation of the forest's soul. And it knew you. It knew your hunger, your power, your fear. As you stepped closer, the shadows in the room seemed to respond, swirling around you like tendrils of smoke, their presence pressing in on you, filling the room with a suffocating energy. The hunger inside you flared, and you could feel it stretching, reaching toward the orb, longing to consume it, to claim it as its own. But you resisted. You reached out, your fingers brushing the surface of the orb, and in that moment you felt it, the truth. The forest had always been this way, alive, hungry, eternal. Its heart was not just a power to be controlled, but a force to be understood. It was a balance, a cycle of life and death, of creation and decay. The hunger was not something that could be tamed, nor could it be fed endlessly. It had to be nourished, guided, or it would consume everything in its path. The orb pulsed in your hands, its energy filling you with an overwhelming understanding. You could feel the entire forest in that moment, its roots, its branches, its ancient pulse, and you realized the weight of the choice you had made. The hunger could never be eradicated, could never be satisfied, but you could guide it. You could help the forest find its balance again, or it would collapse under its own weight. And with that realization, you knew that the forest trials were far from over. The hunger would always be a part of you, a part of the forest, but it was now your responsibility to keep it in check, to protect the balance that had been lost for so long. You turned back toward the door, the orb still glowing softly in your hands, its power now a part of you. The hunger inside you was no longer a threat, it was your ally. And as you stepped back into the lodge, you knew that you had taken the first true step in understanding what it meant to be one with the forest. As you stepped back into the lodge, the weight of the orb in your hands felt both comforting and oppressive. It was no longer just a source of power, but a living thing that pulsed in rhythm with your own heartbeat. The hunger inside you, though tamed, still flickered, like a flame that could either warm or consume. The darkness of the lodge seemed to bow to you, the walls themselves creaking as though acknowledging your newfound understanding. The air felt different now, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before, as if the very fabric of the place was reacting to your shift in purpose. The orb's glow was a steady rhythm, pulling you further into the heart of the forest's mystery. The shadows around you, no longer the mindless shapes of the past, now seemed to watch, to wait with a sentience that filled the room. The hunger had not diminished, but transformed, woven into the essence of the orb and into your own soul. The battle for control was not over. You were its keeper now, its guide, and the burden of that role pressed against you like the weight of the earth itself. You could feel it deep in your chest, the pulse of the forest itself thundering beneath your skin, beneath your feet, calling you, reaching out to you. The hunger, though not gone, had quieted for now, but you knew better than to believe it was over. The forest, vast and eternal, was alive, and it was always changing, always seeking a new equilibrium. And you? You were no longer simply a wanderer in the woods, a soul looking for a way out. No, you had become a part of it. The orb began to glow brighter, its surface swirling faster, as if it had sensed your resolve. The shadows in the corners of the lodge grew longer, twisting, morphing into shapes that seemed almost familiar, yet far too distorted to truly recognize. And then they began to speak, soft whispers at first, low and unintelligible, but growing clearer with each passing moment. It was the forest, its voice reverberating through the walls of the lodge, through the very earth beneath you. The forest knows you now. It feels your pulse, your hunger. But do you understand its will? Do you understand the path you must walk? The voice was not a singular sound, but a chorus, a symphony of whispers that merged with the wind, the rustle of the trees, the creaking of the wood beneath your feet. The hunger inside you stirred at the sound, but you held your ground. You had made the choice. You had embraced the forest's power, and now you needed to own it. You were no longer a mere part of the forest's story. You had become the story itself, its protector, its keeper. The cycle must continue. The voice continued, now growing stronger, more insistent. The heart of the forest is the source of all life and death here, but it can be corrupted. Power, unchecked, destroys everything in its path. And you, chosen one, must decide if you will nurture the balance or shatter it. The words hung in the air like a bitter truth, a promise and a threat rolled into one. You knew the forest had always been a thing of balance, a cycle of light and dark, life and death. But what happened when that balance was disturbed? What happened when the hunger was not guided but given free rein? The answer was simple and terrifying. The forest would burn itself out, consuming everything in its path until there was nothing left but ash and rot. And so it fell to you to guide it. But could you? Could you tame this beast that lived within you? Could you nurture the forest's power without letting it consume everything you had become? As if in answer to your silent question, the shadows around you began to shift once more, their forms becoming more defined, more tangible. Figures, creatures of the forest, emerged from the darkness not with hostility, but with a kind of strange reverence. They were the spirits of the forest, ancient beings whose forms had been lost to the world of men, but whose presence had always remained. They gathered around you, their eyes glowing softly, their shapes fluid and constantly shifting, as if they were one with the wind, the trees, and the earth. They spoke, their voices as old as time itself. "You are not the first to be chosen," one of them said, its voice rich and deep, filled with centuries of wisdom. "Many before you have come seeking the heart of the forest. Many have failed. But you are different. You understand the hunger, the balance." A shiver ran down your spine as the creature stepped closer, its form twisting in the air like smoke. You could feel its presence in your bones, the weight of its gaze pulling at you. There was a truth in its words, one that resonated deep within you. The hunger was not a force to be conquered. It was something to be understood, to be coaxed into alignment with the rhythm of the forest. But still, a doubt lingered in your mind. Could you keep it under control? Could you truly understand the hunger without letting it devour you as it had so many others? There is more to the forest than you know, the creature continued. The heart is not just a source of power. It is a gateway, a threshold between worlds. The forest is not bound by the laws of nature as you understand them. Its roots stretch beyond the earth, beyond the realms of the living. But this power, this ancient energy, it is fragile. A cold wave of realization washed over you. The forest was not just the physical world around you, it was something more. A connection between realms, a place where life and death coexisted, where time was fluid, and where the lines between reality and the unknown blurred. You have taken the heart, the creature said, its form flickering in and out of existence like a fading dream. And with it comes the responsibility of balancing the worlds, the living and the dead, the light and the dark. The hunger feeds on all things. But if you cannot find harmony within it, if you fail to tame it, the balance will break. The forest will fall into chaos, and the boundaries between the realms will shatter. The weight of its words pressed heavily on your chest. The hunger was not just a primal force within you, it was a force that shaped the very fabric of existence. It connected the realms of life, death, and all that lay between them. And it had chosen you to be its keeper. The creatures around you watched in silence, their glowing eyes reflecting a mix of respect and concern. They were waiting for your decision. They knew what was at stake. You had the power to either preserve the forest or destroy it. You had to make your choice now. You had to decide what kind of keeper you would be. The hunger roared within you, urging you to take action, to claim dominion over the force that had claimed you. But as the shadows pressed in, as the voices of the forest grew louder, you knew that the true power was not in domination. It was in restraint, in knowing when to let the hunger flow and when to bind it. You took a deep breath, letting the weight of the decision settle in your bones. The path ahead was unclear. But for the first time, you felt the presence of the forest, not as an enemy, not as a force to be tamed, but as a partner, a being whose balance you were meant to uphold. The orb pulsed again, its rhythm matching your heartbeat. The hunger within you quieted, waiting. And in that moment, you knew the path ahead would not be easy, but you were ready to walk it. The chamber seemed to hold its breath as you stood there, at the heart of the forest's vast web, the orb's pulse steady in your hands. The shadows gathered around you like ancient witnesses, silent and expectant. The creatures of the forest, ethereal and unknowable, lingered in the periphery, their glowing eyes fixed upon you with an intensity that bordered on reverence. The weight of the decision still pressed down upon you, heavy and inescapable. The hunger, though quiet for the moment, was always there, a low murmur in your soul, like the rumble of a storm waiting to break. But this was not a storm you could control. It was the forest's heartbeat, the pulse of life itself, and it would never cease. Not unless the balance you sought was found, unless the hunger was fed in the right way. With a deep breath, you stepped away from the orb, feeling its power hum beneath your fingertips. Its glow seemed to brighten, as though it sensed your resolve. The hunger that had once clawed at your insides now seemed to recede, its intensity shifting from raw desire to something more focused. You realized then that the forest had been testing you. It had tested your will, your determination, your understanding of its power. But now you were ready. You understood the hunger for what it truly was, an ancient force bound to the land, the life, the death, and the eternal cycle of rebirth. The creatures around you seemed to sense this shift. Their forms, once flickering and intangible, became more solid, their bodies taking on a shape that reflected the true nature of the forest. Some were like twisted trees, their limbs bending and curling in impossible ways. Others were shaped like animals, though their eyes glowed with an intelligence far beyond that of any earthly creature. The forest had shaped them, given them form and purpose, and they now stood before you, waiting for your command. The air in the lodge felt charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. The walls seemed to vibrate with the pulse of the orb, the rhythm of the forest's life force reverberating through the very wood. It was as if the entire lodge, the very earth beneath it, was alive, responding to your presence. And then a figure stepped forward from the shadows. Unlike the other creatures, this one did not flicker or shift. It was solid, its form human in shape, though its skin was a deep, earthy green, like the bark of an ancient tree. Its eyes glowed with a soft golden light, and its hair was a mass of tangled vines, woven into intricate patterns. The creature's presence was commanding, yet gentle, as if it carried the weight of the forest itself within its being. "You have come far," the creature said, its voice like the rustling of leaves, soft but heavy with meaning. "But the path ahead is fraught with peril. The hunger you carry within you is not something that can be easily controlled. It is not a mere force of nature. It is the force of nature." The hunger within you stirred at the words, and you gripped the orb tighter, feeling its pulse in time with your own heart. The forest knew. It knew what you had become, what you had taken, and what you would be forced to give in return. "The hunger is ancient," the creature continued, its voice steady. "It is older than the trees, older than the stones beneath your feet. It predates the very cycles of life and death. It is the root of all things, the seed from which all life springs and all life returns. And it is not something that can be conquered. It is something that must be understood." You nodded, absorbing the weight of the creature's words. This was not a simple battle of control, it was a profound connection, a communion with something far older, far greater than anything you had ever known. The hunger was not a thing to be tamed or defeated, it was a part of the world, a part of the earth itself. To fight it was to fight against the very rhythm of existence. The creature stepped closer, its presence overwhelming yet not threatening. "Do you understand now? Do you understand the burden you carry?" You swallowed hard, your mind racing. You had always thought of the hunger as something outside yourself, a force to fight against, to conquer, to control. But now you saw it for what it truly was. It was not a foreign thing. It was part of you, part of the forest, part of everything. "I understand," you whispered, though the words felt small in the face of what you now knew. The hunger was not yours alone. It belonged to the forest, to the land, to the very soil beneath your feet. It was the ancient force that bound all things together, weaving the cycles of life and death, of growth and decay. And now you were its keeper. "The forest will test you," the creature said, its voice low and almost sorrowful. "You may think that you have mastered the hunger, that you have tamed it, but the forest is alive and it will never let you forget that. It will demand sacrifices. It will demand choices. And in the end, it will ask you to give more than you ever thought you had." The hunger within you surged again, its desire clawing at your insides. You felt it like a storm on the horizon, an overwhelming force that was always just out of reach, always threatening to overwhelm you. You could feel the weight of it pressing down on your chest, filling your lungs with its power. And yet you held it back. For now. "What must I do?" you asked, the words heavy with the gravity of your decision. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, its gaze piercing through you as if seeing the very depths of your soul. "You must choose," it said. "The hunger feeds on sacrifice. You must decide what you are willing to offer. And you must decide who you will become." The words echoed through the lodge, through the very air itself, and for the first time, you felt the true weight of your role, the weight of the forest's heart, the weight of the power you had taken. The hunger was not something that could be avoided or ignored. It was a force that had been woven into the very fabric of the world, and now it was a part of you. "You must decide," the creature repeated, its voice softer now. "Will you nurture the balance, or will you allow the hunger to consume everything?" The question lingered in the air, a haunting whisper that carried the weight of centuries. You could feel it, the pull of the hunger, the deep, aching longing to feed, to grow, to conquer. And yet, you knew that to give in to that hunger would mean the destruction of everything you had worked for, everything you had become. You had taken the heart of the forest. You had embraced the hunger. And now, it was time to choose what you would give in return. You took a deep breath, the orb pulsing in your hands, its glow steady and sure. And for the first time, you felt the weight of your responsibility. You were not just the forest keeper. You were its balance, its protector, its guide. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with danger, but you knew now that you would walk it with purpose. The hunger would always be with you, but it would not control you. You would control it, guiding it with wisdom and restraint. And in that moment, you knew that your journey was just beginning. The weight of the forest's heart, no longer just a symbol of power, but a living presence inside you, pulsed against your chest. It was not just hunger. It was life, a vast and intricate network of interconnected forces. And now you were bound to it, connected to something so much greater than yourself. But with that connection came responsibility, and as the weight of your role settled over you, you knew that the balance was fragile. The hunger, though subdued for now, could not be ignored. It would return when least expected, when the forest itself called for it. And when that happened, you would have to decide once more. Choose once again what you were willing to give, what you were willing to sacrifice. The creature that had spoken to you, this being older than the trees, older than the stones, stood before you, its glowing eyes filled with an ancient wisdom. Its form seemed to waver, as though it was not entirely bound by the limits of physical space. It was here but not here. It was everywhere and nowhere all at once. "The hunger will not let you go, Keeper," the creature said softly, its voice like the sigh of wind through the trees. "But it is not the hunger that you must fear. It is what happens when you lose the balance." The words cut through the stillness of the lodge, echoing in your mind like a warning bell, ringing louder with each passing second. The hunger would always be there. But it was not the hunger that was dangerous, it was what it could become. The creature stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. Its form, though unsettling, was somehow calming, as if it held the very essence of the forest's deepest truths within its being. The forest is a living thing, as are you, but it is also a dying thing, a force of decay. The hunger is the root of both creation and destruction. It is the pulse of the forest's life and death. It is the same force that shapes the trees and the winds, that feeds the soil and consumes the bones of those who wander too far into its grasp. A chill crept up your spine. This was not just the hunger of animals or the natural cycle of life and death. It was something deeper. It was the essence of the forest, the very thing that bound existence together. And now you were bound to it. "You have taken the heart of the forest," the creature continued, "but you have also taken the responsibility that comes with it. You are its keeper, yes, but you are also its protector. The hunger must be fed, but it must be fed wisely. If you allow it to grow unchecked, it will consume everything. The forest will be lost." A low hum filled the room, as if the very walls of the lodge were alive, vibrating with the energy of the forest's will. The hunger within you stirred at the creature's words, its pulse quickening as though it too understood the gravity of what was being said. "The balance of the forest is delicate," the creature warned. "One misstep, one moment of weakness, and the hunger will be unleashed. You will not be able to contain it. It will spread beyond the forest, beyond the earth, beyond the realms of life and death. And once that happens, nothing, no one, will be able to stop it." You could feel the weight of the creature's words in the pit of your stomach. The forest was not just a place, it was a force, and you were its keeper, its protector. If you faltered, if you lost control, the hunger would not just consume you, it would consume everything. The thought was suffocating, but you could not back down. Not now. You had chosen this path. You had embraced the hunger, and now it was your responsibility to guide it. You would not let it destroy everything you had fought for. The creature seemed to sense your resolve. It nodded slowly, as though acknowledging your strength, though there was still a trace of sadness in its eyes. "Good," it said, its voice low and resonant. "But remember, Keeper, the hunger is not the only thing that shapes the forest. There are other forces at play. There are beings who would seek to destroy the balance, to tip the scales in their favor. And you will have to fight them, for the forest's life depends on it." A shiver ran through you. You had always thought of the forest as a natural place, untouched by the struggles of the outside world. But now you realized that the forest was not just a place. It was a kingdom, a realm unto itself, full of dangers and threats that you had not yet even begun to understand. The hunger was one thing, but there were others. Darker forces, older powers, and enemies that would not hesitate to tear the forest, and everything you had come to love, apart. The creature stepped back, its form dissolving into the shadows as though it had never been there, leaving you alone in the silent, charged air of the lodge. The hunger inside you throbbed, demanding your attention, but you held firm. You were the keeper now, and with that came the weight of all that was at stake. The fire in the hearth sputtered, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance like ghosts in the corners of the room. The stillness of the lodge felt almost oppressive, as though the very air was thick with anticipation. You had come so far, yet the true test was still ahead. The orb in your hands pulsed once more, its glow brighter than before, like the beating heart of the forest itself. You knew now that your journey was not just about containing the hunger. It was about protecting it, guiding it through the cycles of life and death, creation and decay. It was about finding the balance, and in doing so, ensuring that the forest did not fall into darkness. You turned toward the door, the weight of the orb still heavy in your hands. The creatures, the shadows, the forest itself, they were all waiting. The path ahead was fraught with danger, with choices that would shape the very future of the forest. And though the hunger within you had been tempered, you knew it would rise again when the time came. But for now you were the keeper, and you would protect the balance. The air inside the lodge thickened, charged with an unseen tension. The pulse of the orb in your hands had slowed, but it still throbbed, steady and strong, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. The hunger within you, once a raging storm, had settled into a constant, simmering presence, a quiet force that could not be ignored. You felt its weight on your chest, a reminder that you were no longer just a wanderer lost in the woods. You were something more, a keeper, a protector, a steward of the balance between the forces of life and death that the forest demanded. As you stood at the door, preparing to step into the night, the shadows around you seemed to shift again, warping and flickering like smoke. The creatures of the forest, those ethereal beings who had guided you this far, now stood at the edges of the lodge, their glowing eyes fixed upon you. They did not speak, but their presence was undeniable, a silent acknowledgement that you had not yet finished your journey. Beyond the lodge, the forest stretched out, vast and unyielding. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches reaching toward the sky, blocking out the stars and the moon. The wind whispered through the leaves, a soft, haunting sound that seemed to call to you, urging you to step deeper into its embrace. The hunger inside you stirred, restless and eager, but you held your ground. You knew that the path ahead would not be an easy one. The balance of the forest was fragile, and there were forces at work that you had yet to understand. The creatures, their forms still shifting in the shadows, seemed to recognize this as well. One by one, they began to move toward the door, their eyes never leaving you. It was as though they were preparing to follow you, or perhaps to warn you. You didn't know which, but you knew one thing for certain. You were not alone. The forest itself had chosen you. The hunger within you was its vessel, and you were now its guardian. You stepped into the cold night, the darkness enveloping you like a heavy cloak. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting the forest in an eerie gloom. The wind, once gentle, now howled through the trees, bending their branches and shaking their leaves. The shadows stretched and writhed as if the very forest were alive, shifting and changing with every breath of wind. As you walked deeper into the woods, the hunger inside you began to stir once more. It was a quiet tug, a whispering voice in the back of your mind, urging you forward. The further you went, the stronger it became. The hunger was not just a physical thing, it was a call to the very heart of the forest, a call that you could not ignore. The hunger was the forest. It was the pulse of life and death, the very force that governed the cycles of growth and decay. And you, as its keeper, were bound to it. The trees seemed to close in around you, their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like fingers, clawing at the air. The path ahead was uncertain, winding and twisting through the thick underbrush, but you pressed on, guided by the steady thrum of the orb in your hands. It pulsed with an ancient energy, and you could feel it. Something was calling to you from the depths of the forest. Something dark and primal, something that had been waiting for you. And then you saw it. In the distance, beyond the thick layers of trees, there was a faint glow. It was not the soft, comforting light of a campfire or the steady gleam of a lantern. No, this light was harsh, flickering as though it were fighting to stay alive. It was a beacon in the darkness, drawing you toward it with an irresistible pull. The hunger within you flared again, louder this time, as though it recognized the light, as though it understood that this was the heart of the forest. The place where the balance would be tested, the place where you would have to make your choice. You quickened your pace, your feet crunching through the underbrush, the sound echoing in the stillness of the forest. The shadows around you grew deeper, the air colder, as if the very forest were holding its breath. The hunger inside you roared louder, a constant tug, pulling you forward, urging you to reach the source of the light. As you drew closer, you could see it more clearly. The light was coming from a clearing in the forest, a small, secluded space where the trees had been cleared away long ago. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure, half buried beneath layers of moss and vines. It was ancient, older than anything you had ever seen, its weathered stones cracked and crumbling under the weight of centuries. The air around the structure hummed with a strange energy, the same energy that resonated within you, the pulse of the hunger, the call of the forest. You stepped into the clearing, the light growing brighter, almost blinding. The orb in your hands pulsed faster now, its glow matching the intensity of the light ahead. The hunger inside you clawed at the edges of your mind, demanding more, urging you to take what was rightfully yours. But you held back. This was not the time for recklessness. This was the moment of truth, the moment when you would face the forest's true test. You had been chosen to guide the hunger, to balance its power with the pulse of life itself. And now, standing before this ancient stone structure, you knew that your choices would shape the very future of the forest, and everything within it. The wind picked up, howling through the trees as the light before you intensified, swirling around the stone structure like a vortex. It was as if the forest itself was reacting to your presence, waiting for you to make the next move. The hunger within you surged again, demanding that you claim it, that you seize the power that had always been within your reach. But you knew better now. You had learned that power, unchecked, would destroy everything. You had learned that the hunger was not something to be controlled, but something to be understood. It was a force that needed balance, a force that could either sustain the forest or tear it apart. And now you stood at the edge of that precipice, knowing that your decision would determine the fate of everything you had come to care for. The light in the clearing flared one last time, and then, slowly, it began to fade as if it were waiting for you to make your move. You stepped forward, the hunger within you quieting for the moment, allowing you to think clearly. The orb in your hands pulsed with anticipation as though it, too, was waiting for you to choose. You knew what you had to do. This was not just about the hunger. This was about the forest. About preserving the balance between life and death, between creation and decay. The forest had chosen you, and now it was time for you to choose in return. The hunger would never be satisfied, but it could be guided. You raised the orb high above your head, and as you did, the clearing seemed to respond. The air hummed with energy, the very ground beneath your feet vibrating with power. The hunger inside you flared, but now you could feel it aligning with the pulse of the forest. The light in the clearing flickered, shifting in time with the orb's glow, as if the forest itself were acknowledging your decision. And for the first time you felt it, balance. The hunger, no longer a force of destruction, now pulsed in harmony with the life around you. The forest's power was no longer something to be feared. It was something you had learned to control, to guide. You had made your choice. And as the clearing faded into darkness, the shadows around you seemed to whisper their approval. You had become the keeper of the hunger and the protector of the forest. And your journey was far from over. The silence that followed was palpable, thick like the forest air just before a storm. The clearing around you, once charged with the intensity of the orb's glow, now stood still, waiting. The power of the forest seemed to ripple through you, resonating with every breath you took. The hunger within you, once an overwhelming force of primal desire, had now settled into a strange calmness, a focus almost. It was as if you had learned how to hold the reins of something wild, something ancient, yet not allow it to trample you. The orb pulsed softly in your hands, its rhythm now aligned with your own heartbeats. The light around you was no longer blinding, but instead flickered softly, casting long, twisting shadows across the clearing. You looked around as though seeing the forest for the first time. The trees that towered around you seemed less menacing, less like watchful sentinels, and more like ancient, sentient beings, partners in the delicate balance you had pledged to protect. The hunger inside you, though quiet, was never far from the surface. It was still there, pulsing with the rhythm of the forest's life force, but it no longer demanded your complete attention. It had become an ally, not a master. But something was different now. Something was stirring in the air. The wind picked up again, a soft whisper at first, but quickly growing louder, as though the forest itself was speaking. The trees groaned under the pressure of the wind, their branches creaking and bending as though responding to an unseen force. The shadows around you lengthened, stretching toward the edges of the clearing like dark tendrils seeking something. A sudden sharp snap of a branch echoed through the forest, and you spun around, heart racing. The hunger surged within you, its claws scratching at the edges of your awareness. The orb in your hand grew warm, its glow intensifying. But it was not the forest itself that had stirred. It was something else. Something other. The air shimmered like heat rising from a fire, and before you could react, the world around you seemed to shift. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. The very ground beneath your feet trembled slightly, the trees swaying in unnatural ways, as if caught in the grip of a force beyond the natural order. And then you saw it. A figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, stepping out from the shadows. It was tall, almost unnaturally so, with an ethereal glow that made it seem as though it were not entirely part of this world. The figure was cloaked in a flowing, dark garment that seemed to ripple with its own shadow, its face hidden beneath the hood, its form flickering like a shadow in the moonlight. The air around it seemed to pulse with an energy unlike anything you had felt before, something ancient, dark, and powerful. The hunger inside you roared at the sight of this presence, its fury rising as it recognized something it did not understand. But you held it back, focusing on the figure in the clearing, trying to make sense of what you were seeing. The figure moved closer, and as it did, the shadows around it seemed to stretch and follow, clinging to its form like an extension of its will. The air grew colder, and the wind, which had been whispering, now howled through the trees, rattling the branches and sending leaves swirling around the clearing like dark confetti. The figure spoke, its voice low and resonant, like the echo of thunder in the distance. "You have taken the heart of the forest," it said, each word heavy with meaning, carrying an ancient weight. "And with it, you have bound yourself to the hunger. But do you understand the cost of this power, Keeper? Do you understand the consequences of what you have chosen? You stood frozen, heart pounding in your chest. The hunger inside you was now a roaring fire, fighting for control, clawing at your thoughts. But you fought it back, focusing instead on the figure before you. I understand, you said, though the words felt uncertain, shaky even in your own ears. You had understood the hunger as a force, something that must be balanced, something to be guided. But this figure, this presence, it spoke as though it knew more, as though it knew things about the forest and the hunger that you had yet to learn. The figure tilted its head as though considering your response. Do you? It asked, its voice tinged with an almost imperceptible amusement. You carry the heart of the forest, and yet you have no true understanding of the forces you now wield. The hunger you have embraced is not simply the pulse of life and death. It is a doorway, a veil between worlds, keeper. A veil that, once crossed, cannot be unmade. The word struck you like a blow, and for a moment, you could do nothing but stare at the figure, confusion and fear rising in your chest. A doorway? A veil between worlds? What did it mean? The hunger inside you stirred violently, as if responding to the figure's words, its presence growing larger, more intense. The orb in your hands grew warmer, its glow flickering like a dying flame. The figure seemed to notice the shift in energy, and it spoke again, its voice growing darker. You do not understand, it said, the words laced with a finality that sent a chill down your spine. The hunger that you have taken is not just a force within this world. It is a doorway to the realms beyond, places that are not meant to be crossed. And you, keeper, are standing on the edge of that threshold. The hunger within you screamed for release, clawing at your very soul, demanding that you give in. You could feel the pressure of it, the weight of the power you had taken, the responsibility now thrust upon you. The forest had chosen you, but what had you truly chosen in return? What do you want? You finally managed to ask, your voice shaky but determined. You had to know the truth. You had to understand what was happening. The figure took another step forward, its form flickering like smoke in the night air. I am but a messenger, it said, its voice growing colder. But I have seen the cost of your actions. The hunger you carry, it will consume you, keeper. And when it does, it will not just devour the forest. It will tear the veil itself asunder. The worlds you do not understand will bleed into this one, and there will be no stopping it. You felt the pulse of the orb grow stronger in your hands, the hunger inside you rising, howling for release. The ground beneath your feet seemed to shift, and the trees around the clearing began to sway, their roots twisting, writhing like serpents. The wind howled louder, the shadows growing deeper and more unnatural, wrapping around you like a shroud. The hunger within you was now a fire, a blaze that threatened to consume everything. You could feel the power surging through your veins, the strength of the forest, the call of the otherworldly realms beyond. It was overwhelming, unstoppable. And the figure before you, this being, knew exactly what you were feeling. You stand at the threshold, keeper, it said, its voice now a whisper, but one that cut through the air like a blade. But you must choose. Will you guard the veil? Or will you tear it open? The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The hunger inside you roared in response, clawing at the edges of your mind, demanding that you choose. But what choice was there? To guard the veil, to restrain the hunger, or to tear it open and unleash everything it had been hiding? The forest around you seemed to hold its breath, the trees swaying in unnatural rhythms, the shadows creeping closer as if they too awaited your decision. The figure before you, the messenger, the harbinger, remained still, its form flickering and shifting like a mirage in the moonlight. The hunger was growing stronger, pulsing in your chest, in your hands, as the orb throbbed with a steady, insistent rhythm. You could feel the ancient power within it, ancient and vast, filling you with both awe and terror. You understand nothing of what you hold, keeper, the figure continued, its voice low and distant, like the echo of forgotten gods. The hunger you carry is a key, and the veil is what it unlocks. You believe you control it, that you can guide it. But it is not you who are in control, it is the hunger itself that will decide when the veil is torn. Your heart pounded in your chest as the orb pulsed, its rhythm matching the frantic beat of your pulse. The hunger within you was no longer a distant presence. It was an entity, a living thing, crawling under your skin, demanding release. The power of the forest, of life and death itself, was now yours to wield, but at what cost? The veil was more than just a metaphor. It was a boundary, a thin line between the world of the living and realms far beyond comprehension. To tear it open would mean chaos, a flood of ancient powers, of forgotten forces pouring into the world. And the forest, in all its twisted beauty, would be consumed in that flood. For a moment the world seemed to still. The wind died down. The rustling of the leaves quieted. Even the hunger within you seemed to wait, as though sensing the weight of the decision that lay before you. The figure stepped forward, its form solidifying, until it was no longer a shadow but something tangible, a being of darkness and light, a creature born from the very fabric of the forest's power. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and its voice, when it spoke again, was filled with an ancient sorrow. "You think you have power over the hunger," it said, its tone now tinged with regret. "But you are only its vessel. You carry its desires, its demands, its unyielding thirst. You are not its master keeper, you are its servant. And it will not be satisfied until it has torn the veil and crossed the threshold." You clenched your fists, the orb growing warmer in your hands, its power surging with each passing second. The hunger within you screamed to be unleashed, its claws scratching at your thoughts. The power of the forest, of the very essence of life and death, flowed through your veins, through every fiber of your being. It was intoxicating. It was everything you had ever wanted and more. But deep down, a voice, small, fragile, but steady, reminded you of what you had learned. The hunger was not something to be dominated. It was not something to be used. It was a force that needed balance, needed control. Without it, the world would burn. You looked up at the figure, your mind racing. The forest was alive with possibilities, with power, with hunger. And yet, you knew that if you gave in, if you allowed the veil to tear, the balance would be lost. The world would change, and not for the better. "I will not let it consume me," you said, your voice trembling but firm. The orb in your hands pulsed in agreement, its glow steady, though still edged with an undeniable hunger. "I will guard the veil. I will keep the balance." The figure stared at you, its eyes unblinking, its expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of you moved, the weight of the decision hanging between you like a suffocating fog. The hunger inside you pushed against the decision, a storm of desire that threatened to tear you apart. But still you held firm. "You have chosen," the figure said finally, its voice thick with something that could have been either pity or respect. "But the veil is thin, keeper. It is fraying. And the hunger will always seek to tear it open. You cannot hold it forever. The balance you seek is fragile. Do not mistake your power for control. You are but a moment in the cycle, a single breath in the wind. The hunger is eternal." The figure's words settled over you like a shroud, heavy and foreboding. You felt the weight of what it was saying, the truth behind its words. The hunger was not something that could be defeated. It was a part of the forest, part of the natural cycle, part of the very fabric of life and death. And as its keeper, you were bound to it. But as you stood there, alone in the clearing, the orb still pulsing with the forest's ancient power, you knew that your decision was not just about controlling the hunger. It was about guiding it, understanding it. The hunger was not a force to be feared, it was a force to be respected, to be kept. The figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the shadows, leaving only the soft rustle of the wind behind. But its words lingered, like a ghost in the air, a reminder that the path you had chosen was not an easy one. You were now the keeper of the hunger, and with that came a responsibility greater than anything you had ever known. The veil remained, for now. But as you turned away, feeling the weight of the orb in your hands and the hunger still thrumming beneath your skin, you knew that the forest had not finished with you. The hunger would rise again. And when it did, you would have to make your choice once more. The path ahead was uncertain. The forest was vast, and its mysteries were deep, stretching far beyond what you could understand. But you had taken the first step. And now there was no turning back. You would guard the veil. Or, in the end, you would tear it apart. The forest seemed to breathe around you, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. The orb in your hands pulsed steadily, its glow a constant companion, a reminder of the power that surged through you. The hunger, though quiet for the moment, was ever present, like a shadow waiting in the wings, always watching, always waiting for the right moment to pounce. And that moment you knew would come. But for now the forest was still. The creatures had retreated into the depths of the trees, their glowing eyes no longer peering from the darkness. The wind had calmed, and the oppressive silence that had once held the world in a suffocating grip was now broken, replaced by the soft murmur of the woods. The forest had in some way acknowledged your choice. It had accepted you as its keeper. But there was no celebration, no fanfare, only the weight of what you had chosen. You stood in the clearing, the remnants of the figure's presence fading into the ether, its warning still echoing in your mind. The hunger would always seek to tear the veil. The balance you sought was fragile, and every moment you spent guarding it was a battle against the inevitable. You had chosen to hold the veil, to keep the boundary between this world and the otherworldly forces that lay beyond. But you were beginning to understand that the hunger itself was a force that could not be contained forever. It was ancient, it was relentless, and it was alive in ways that you could barely comprehend. The forest was not just a place, it was a living entity, and the hunger was its heartbeat, its lifeblood. You had taken the heart of the forest into yourself, and now you were bound to it for better or for worse. The orb in your hands pulsed again, its light flickering like a distant star, and you felt the pull of it. The hunger inside you responded to the orb's call, a low, insistent thrum that reverberated through your chest. You knew that it was time to move. Time to leave the clearing, to step deeper into the forest, to face the next challenge that awaited you. The forest had chosen you, but it was not a choice that would come without sacrifice. You turned away from the clearing, the shadows lengthening as you stepped deeper into the woods. The trees around you seemed to shift, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers, brushing against your skin. The hunger in your chest was a steady hum now, a pulse that matched the rhythm of the forest. You could feel the weight of the forest's gaze upon you, 1,000 eyes watching from the darkness, waiting to see what you would do next. The path before you was uncertain, winding through the thick underbrush, through the tangled roots and ancient trees that seemed to whisper as you passed. Every step you took felt like a step into the unknown, but there was a clarity in your mind now, a focus that had not been there before. The hunger was not something to be feared, it was something to be understood. It was part of the forest, and in embracing it, you had become part of it. You were its keeper, and you would guide it. But you would have to be careful. The balance was delicate. The veil was thin. You walked for what felt like hours, the sounds of the forest surrounding you, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the creaking of the trees in the wind. The orb in your hands pulsed with a quiet intensity, and you could feel its power radiating outward, filling the space around you with its energy. The forest seemed to shift with every step, as if it were alive in a way that was more than just physical. It was conscious, aware of your presence, aware of your power. As you moved deeper into the woods, the trees began to thin, and you saw something ahead, something that made your heart skip a beat. It was a structure, half buried in the undergrowth, its stone walls crumbling and moss-covered, as if time itself had forgotten it. It was not the lodge, but something older, something that seemed to belong to another age, another world. The sight of it sent a chill down your spine, a whisper of recognition in the back of your mind. You approached cautiously, the hunger inside you stirring at the sight of the ruins. It was as if the forest itself was calling to you, urging you forward. The orb in your hands pulsed faster, its light flickering like a flame caught in the wind. You could feel the power of the place, a deep, ancient energy that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the structure. It was not just a ruin, it was a gateway, a threshold to something beyond. You stepped closer, your breath catching in your throat. The hunger within you surged, and for a moment, you felt the pull of it, the desire to take what lay beyond, to consume the power that beckoned. But you held it back, steadying yourself. The hunger could not control you. Not here. Not now. The door to the structure was ajar, the stone frame darkened by years of neglect, the threshold barely visible beneath the layers of ivy and vines that had overtaken it. You stepped forward, the orb in your hands casting long, flickering shadows across the ground. As you crossed the threshold, the air seemed to change. It was colder here, the temperature dropping sharply as if the very walls of the structure were breathing with the force of ancient power. The inside of the structure was dark, but not entirely so. A faint light emanated from the cracks in the stone, from the seams in the floorboards, as if the place itself was alive with energy. The hunger stirred again, more intense now, filling you with a sense of urgency. You had to know what lay within. You stepped deeper into the building, your footfalls echoing off the stone floor. The air was thick with dust, the remnants of forgotten rituals and long-dead worshippers. The walls were lined with faded murals, their colors long washed away by time. But even in their faded state, you could sense the power that had once been here, the reverence that had been given to this place, to whatever force had been worshipped here. The orb in your hands pulsed stronger, as though it recognized something here, something it had been waiting for. The hunger within you writhed, eager, almost desperate. You had come this far. You had crossed into this ancient place. What was the forest's true purpose? What was the hunger's true nature? And then you saw it. At the center of the room, nestled between two massive stone pillars, was a stone altar, long abandoned and covered in dust. But it was not the altar itself that drew your attention. It was the markings on the floor around it. Ancient symbols carved deep into the stone, surrounding the altar like a protective circle. The symbols were familiar, though you could not place why. They were tied to something you had seen before, something deep in the heart of the forest. The hunger inside you stirred again, and for the first time you felt it, the true power of the hunger, of the forest itself. This was no ordinary place. It was a temple, a place of ancient worship, a place where the veil between worlds had once been thinner than anywhere else in the forest. You stepped closer to the altar, the orb in your hands now burning with a bright, white-hot light. The hunger surged inside you, pushing against your ribs, demanding to be fed. You could feel the ancient power that rested here, like a coiled serpent waiting to strike. But you were the keeper. And this power, this hunger, it would not consume you. Not yet. Not until you understood.